Members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following this meeting via social media, members of the media, persons in the Tribune, good afternoon. And welcome to this public meeting of Parliament for today, Monday, the 25th of May. This meeting is number 19, public meeting number 19 of the Parliament of St. Martin. We have established a quorum of 13 members. I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notices of absence from the members De Weaver and La Vega. And I now look to the floor and I ask of the members if any member has a notification at this time. I see we have MP Lacroes who has indicated such. I give the floor to MP Lacroes.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair Lady, Griffier, Prime Minister and his support staff, those in the Tribune, my fellow colleagues here in Parliament, and those watching and listening via social media. A blessed, blessed, blessed Monday afternoon to one and all. Madam Chair Lady, I'd like to track back a little on the Independence of Flag Day of the people of Haiti that was celebrated with a rally, and this, seeing that they have a exchange between the French and the Dutch side, that this time it was on the French side and properly well attended. Madam Chair Lady, yesterday also the Guyanese community with zero funds from government literally had a nice celebration on the Ring Road. So my call out to all, and I say all, everyone, we don't need government. We would like government support because they could find money for everything else, but we don't need government support to hold a rally or to take a piece of property on a ring road or even in the government-owned festival village and do something. So the fact that there's nothing going to be done, and I don't know if that has changed, that is unacceptable to my person. Then, Madam Chair Lady, today we're here for a long-awaited meeting with the Prime Minister, and I will say exactly the same things that I said to the Minister of VSA when he was here. And my advice to the Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair Lady, is we want to hear the truth, nothing but the truth, so help your God and your job. We want no stories, we want it as truthful as possible, which is 100%. Come straight, Prime Minister, we want no stories. We don't want no stories. The embarrassment has drawn out a little too long. We need to bring this to an end. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacroes. I do see the need for a notification, and the need is indicated by MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Prime Minister and your support staff. Those in the Tribune, to my honorable colleagues here, good afternoon to the people of beautiful St. Martin. Madam Chair, early on, there was a meeting that couldn't go ahead because of the lack of quorum. I received some messages asking if we in opposition is not here. We were here. We were here, Madam Chair. But it's about time that opposition also got to put on the foot and stand for something. We call for meetings. These meetings are being delayed. And then we'll get meetings about a nature policy. Not that it's not important. It is important. But the same Minister of Rummy who's here presenting his nature policy ain't doing nothing for this country in the capacity as Minister of Rummy with the cleanliness, the car wrecks, the potholes, etc. Y'all have the Super 9, Madam Chair. And if the meeting had to go ahead, then your full 9 should have been there. I am not going to sit in a meeting that I feel is not going to benefit the country. The minister is not doing his job. We motion a motion of confidence against him, and it's about time it comes to a vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I continue, and I give the floor to MP Doran for notifications. MP Doran.
Good afternoon to my colleagues, the Honorable Prime Minister, support staff, persons in the Tribune, and a special shout out to the people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, before we go into the substance of today's meeting, I must place on the record that I find it quite unfortunate that Parliament is yet again dedicating hours into something of this magnitude. There are so many urgent national issues right now, Madam Chair, and for us to sit here and now go into a discussion about a personal issue between the Minister of General Affairs and the Minister of Health, I find it quite unfortunate. Madam Chair, just today on Facebook, one of our constituents said, I think I speak for all of us when I say the only urgent meeting that we should be looking forward to is fixing the real issues that we face, rather than those in the rearview mirror. Y'all love missliding, finger pointing solely, and topple government rather than truly put the country above self. Madam Chair, I share those sentiments because when I listened to the Minister of VSR a couple of days ago, all I heard was personal issues between him and the Prime Minister, and I mentioned it here on the floor. It's something that I believe could have been resolved within the party headquarters. Madam Chair, we have the GB bills, the garbage, the cleanliness of the island, all these different pressing matters. Up to now, we can't discuss them, but here we are going to dedicate a minimum of 4 to 5 hours discussing personal stuff that has now created a national crisis because eventually it interferes in the governance of this country. Madam Chair, my next point is the following. We requested a meeting on December 10th, a public meeting on December 10th about revenue generation measures for the government of St. Martin. Madam Chair, the Minister of ECYS complaining that she don't have no money. The Minister of Rummy complaining there's no money. Justice Tiat, up to today, Madam Chair, 5 months, almost 6 months later, the meeting has not been convened, not even once. Madam Chair, it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful, Madam Chair. I am a member of Parliament just like everyone in the procedure, Madam Chair. Why are we being treated like this? The people deserve better. Come on, man.
That's it, MP Doran?
That's it.
Thank you, MP Doran, for your notification. I continue and I give the floor to MP Roseberg. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Blessed afternoon to the Prime Minister and the support staff. Blessed afternoon to the people in the public tribune, my honorable colleagues that are here today, and of course to the people of St. Martin listening through the social media channels. Blessed week. That being said, I would like to start off with congratulating the Youth Brigade. It was a very successful event past Friday. It's nice to see that there are a lot of youth participating in the Youth Brigade, and it's also nice to see that the ministry and the Youth Brigade have sat together and come to an understanding in regards to the crime fund and the possibility in having a project that specifically looks at the youth, which we have mentioned in the past already that is needed to come with a plan next to the current plan that they already have for the youth that is participating in the Youth Brigade. So that's I see as a successful development, and I'm looking forward in that being implemented. Other than that, I've also seen some other, I would say, successful movements because, yes, the government has a role to play. Yes, we as members of Parliament have a role to play. But I always say the public as well have their rights and have their opportunities. And I'm happy to see that the public as well is gathering together in regards to making use of those rights because, as we all know, electricity and water is a basic right, and we all can play a role in such. So from the different angles, it's being addressed. And I believe as well in regards to that matter that GEBE needs to know that it is serious through you, Madam Chair, and that it is important that they know their role and it's important that they follow procedures. And I've seen that disconnection, once again, is planning to take place. But up to now, I haven't seen a disconnection policy. So disconnecting people, if you don't pay and you're making use of such right as electricity, I'm not saying that you should stop paying. You have to pay because you're making use of electricity. So that is not what I'm trying to avoid. What I'm trying to avoid is unlawfully disconnecting persons, and that shouldn't be happening. And yet again, I'm seeing that it's happening. So through this medium, seeing that GEBE is not showing up to Parliament meetings, I know they're not obligated, but on the other hand, still, if you really want to resolve this matter, you have to take a responsibility. So therefore, through you, Madam Chair, I'm using this medium to hopefully receiving a disconnection policy. Other than that, I have also seen, Madam Chair, and I want to commend the Minister of Théâtre and also Vromi in regards to the current development with BTP and having an oversight in that sense. And hopefully that will come to an understanding and seeing where it's going wrong and the consequences of not adhering to such. Lastly, I do believe that the government further should look into the options in taking this matter further in their own hands. We have seen in the past where it went wrong with the harbor, where the public prosecutor needed to step in to do an enquête procedure. And I believe it's time for us, seeing that we have seen that it has been going wrong for a long time. A lot of time pointing fingers have taken place. It wasn't this government, it was a past government. And I believe we reached to the point of an enquête procedure where it will be looked into where it has been going wrong and who should be held responsible, and then the pointing fingers can stop. And when it's clear who should be held responsible, there should be consequences to that, and the law gives that option. So Book 2 of the Civil Code should be followed by starting an enquête procedure through the aandeelhouder being the government. So I would advise the government to do that. Aqualectra and Curaçao has done it, and other companies have done it as well, and we should be doing it as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roseburg. The next MP to speak for notifications is MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to our Secretary General. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister, his support staff, those of you in the Tribune and the viewing public. Madam Chair, I would like to first start off with congratulating the St. Martin Promoting Young Ambassadors Foundation on their 11th St. Martin Interscholastic Idol primary and secondary school competition. And I would also like to congratulate the Mary, Genevieve, and CPA, and as winners and all the other participating students and schools. It was a very, very, very good day, and I hope to see more support for these type of events. Madam Chair, every press briefing, every article from every minister and the Council of Ministers, they talk about the lack of funding, not having budget, don't have any money. But Madam Chair, the Parliament received a letter from the Minister of Finance saying and giving us a timeline for when we should expect the budget. That timeline indicated May 1st for the budget to be in Parliament. And I've said it before, Madam Chair, when I go back and look at your history personally, there was always a concern for late budgets, and the silence is very, very telling. Beyond not having a budget on time, we are traveling, or the members of Parliament are traveling to IPCO in a few. So that would mean when will we actually have this budget meeting? On top of that, I told somebody today that every month that this government sits in office is a day that you get poorer. Why? Civil servants can't get a COLA because there's no budget. Civil servants will not get their increased in vacation pay on June 14 because they can't legally pay it out. MP Duran talked about our meeting that we called December 10th, 2025, On Parliament, we're saying we have ideas. We want to present revenue-generating measures since the government is not able to. The meeting can't be called, but we could call a meeting in a week to a lack of confidence from Minister Vesa last week. And this week again, that's how urgent it was called. So, Madam Chair, the priorities of this government, this coalition, is, again, very telling. We've had meetings where the Minister of Finance said in September last year that she would come back before the end of the year to talk about her revenue-generating measure, which was the dividend withholding tax. And come back with an expert to explain the whole Parliament. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. All the fightful committees that we have in this Parliament, all the coalition fights to be chairs. For what? For what? Madam Chair, the Minister of TIAT mentioned in her press briefing that she's not going to do like the former government and give relief to the people of St. Martin by reducing the TOT on the taxes for gasoline. We did it twice. Twice. So the government is going to continue to monitor, but the reason why the government is doing this, and she indicated it, she indicated that the government is actually, perhaps, that's the word she said, making more money today on the gas prices being high. Why? Because they have no other idea, solution, or creativity to raise funds, only on how to spend funds on irrelevant activities and parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. The next MP to speak during notifications is MP Ottley. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Madam Chair, I was trifling and thinking if to do a notification, but knowing me, I'll regret it if I don't. Madam Chair, it's not a secret. Last week, I was picked up at my home for questioning. But it wasn't picked up for questioning. It was, you are under arrest. And then within an hour, I was released. Madam Chair asked, why couldn't you have just called me? And I would have gladly come answer questions. But I knew the bigger picture, because after reaching the National Detective Office at 7:50, by 8 a.m., the prosecutor already sent an article out to all medias. So I knew what the motive was. And I thank all my colleagues that reached out, and those who didn't, so be it. But those that reached out, because I've always said it, prison ain't for dogs. And today, tomorrow, if you're a loving mother, a loving father, a loving brother, a loving sister, and somebody mess with your family, you could end up there. You see, Madam Chair, I was very proud of myself. Extremely proud of myself. To see my brother being attacked with a knife, and I still did the honorable thing and separated instead of being involved. And today, you still can get picked up. And it's okay. The court will take its process. I have done this dance too much times before, and over and over and over I've been vindicated. So my day will come again. You see, Madam Chair, and I must say, when another MP had their issue, many people would try to poke the bear, and I say, I'm not, because of the principle I stand for. And we have seen it where MP Peterson, where people would say, I want money or else I am going to. I have seen it with my colleague MP Lacroes, where at his establishment, after the gentleman being put out, say, let's deal with it on the side or else I am going to. Where people call my phone and tell me they want money or else they're going to the police. And I say, well, go do what you got to do, because the buck won't stop. There's another MP in here, same situation, his brother attacked. The MP did the honorable thing, and the police literally was forcing the people to say the MP hit you. Today for me, tomorrow for whoever. Could you imagine if I was rejoicing on Peterson? If I was holier than thou doing videos and all kind of thing when MP Peterson was in his issue, and then today is my turn? Madam Chair, we, as Member of Parliament, and I have said it when I was a minister, they tried to stop me from being a minister. I was vindicated 14 months later with just a thank you. This was placed in order to stop an individual from being Prime Minister. And today, prosecutors have selective ambition, selective amnesia on when they want to pick you up or when crime is happening. Election coming, MP Rolando Bryson. Election coming, MP Hakeem Arundel. Election coming, Theo Hilliger. O'Neill Arundel. Go down the line, down the line. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing court cases coming up. Madam Chair, let me put this clear for the public. If you do the crime, you do the time. Me, my family, what we stand for, we ain't afraid of nothing. So if we do something, we're going to take our responsibility. I don't have to lie. But in this case, Omar E.C. Ottley did nothing. And we as members of parliament, and I as a member of parliament, going to do our best to ensure that this one day comes to us to an end. You will not, to the prosecutor's office, you will not no longer have the authority to destroy people's life and then just say, oh, it's over. One day, that too will come to an end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, we continue with this meeting after notifications by the members of Parliament. The agenda point for this public meeting is deliberations with the Prime Minister addressing the recent allegations of integrity breaches concerning the Prime Minister's involvement in the affairs of the Ministry of Public Health, Social Development and Labor. This request was made, the request for this meeting was made by the members Ottley, Lacroes, and Lewis. It is dated the 7th of April of 2026, and it is registered on the IS 926 of this parliamentary year. I say this to respond to the question of basically why and how this meeting has been called. The meeting was requested based on the criteria of 3 members requesting, and that has happened. This is an official meeting request of Parliament. Before going over to the handling of the agenda point, and as this is a public meeting, I want to remind the members of Parliament and the general public that I will be allowing interruptions, which is the prerogative of the chair during public meetings. And I just ask the members of Parliament to maintain the criteria of interruptions, and those criteria in brief are that you would get the floor to make a brief remark, make an assertion, or ask a question, put a question to the floor. So going back really to the agenda point, as I mentioned, it is a request dated the 7th of April. It is registered on the IS 926 of this year, requested by the members Ottley, Lacroes, and Lewis. And so at this time, as we would usually do, I look to the requestors, one of the requesters, and ask if there is the desire to elucidate on this request. I see MP Ottley has already taken the floor, so I give MP Ottley the floor to elucidate briefly on the request for this meeting. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would have to take this moment as one of the initiators of this meeting to just differ with one of my colleagues a bit. While I understand the sentiments of this being a melee between a party, it got serious when integrity and bribery and abuse of power and those things come up. See, Madam Chair, we are talking about the Honorable Prime Minister of this country, and if these accusations are indeed true, then they need to be addressed and handled by Parliament. So today, we'll give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt, and we will hear how the Honorable Prime Minister will respond to those accusations. I'm not really much interested in the melee back and forth, but the integrity breach accusations, the abuse of power, and the bribery accusations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley, for that brief elucidation. And the Prime Minister, of course, has received the invitation to this meeting, so he knows and has been informed as to what it's all about. So I will now give the floor to the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, Dr. Luc Mercelina, who will be not only giving some opening remarks, but address the matter at hand to the members of Parliament and the general public. Prime Minister, I hereby give you the floor.
President of Parliament, Secretary General, members of Parliament, those in the tribune, and of course, the people of St. Martin following on whatever channel of social media, good evening. First of all, by the introduction, the Member of Parliament, MP Duran, said that he had the impression that it was a personal issue between the Minister of VSA and the Minister of General Affairs. And I can imagine, after the presentation of the 12th of May, that that had to be the conclusion of the Member of Parliament, because there were a lot of allegations constantly towards the Prime Minister, and at the end there were no tangible proof of nothing that has been complained about. So of course the members of Parliament have to conclude that it should be something personal. What I want to make use of this opportunity to say that for sure from the side of the Prime Minister it's absolutely not personal, but as MP Ottley said, it's about concerns of things that are going on in ministries, and especially standing up for integrity. Madam Chair, it is unfortunate that I'm standing here today in a meeting of Parliament with this matter as the agenda point. Before entering public office, I served this country for many years as a surgeon at the St. Martin Medical Center. And I can tell you as a surgeon, you carry the weight of human life and human emotions every single day. You learn very quickly that trust is sacred and that integrity is not simply a word or a slogan. It becomes part of who you are, because people are entrusting you with what matters most to them, and that is their lives and, of course, the lives of the people they love. In the operating room, to step it up, there is no room for ego. There is no room for recklessness, and there is no room for abuse of trust. Every action must be guided by discipline, professionalism, compassion, ethics, and responsibility. Those experiences shape a person for life. They shape how you lead, how you make decisions, how you treat people. It all matters. Those values did not disappear when I entered public office. They remain the foundation of how I serve this country today as Prime Minister. And as Prime Minister, I fully understand and respect my duty to account to Parliament. However, that duty is to give account on governing matters, not on hearsay, not on unsubstantiated allegations, and for sure, not on emotional outbursts. My presence here today was requested based on allegations made by the Minister of VSA during the meeting of May the 12th, 2026, under the agenda point, Deliberations with the Minister of VSA addressing the recent integrity allegations within the ministry, including the request for an investigation by the Integrity Chamber. Rather than confining himself to that agenda point, the Minister of VSA used, or I dare say, abused the opportunity of that meeting to level a series of serious allegations against me in my capacity as Prime Minister, including accusations of what I repeat, integrity breaches, abuse of power, bullying, and hijacking of ministries. These are serious allegations. Madam Chair, these accusations are reckless, unfounded, and do not accurately reflect the facts on the manner in which this government has conducted itself. These are, as I said, grave claims. They do not only affect the office I hold and the political party of which I am a part of, the URSM, they also risk undermining public confidence in the institution of government at a time when this country requires stability, maturity, professionalism, and strong leadership. As Prime Minister, I find it deeply unfortunate that sensitive internal governmental matters were discussed publicly in a manner that appeared more focused on political sensationalism than constructive governance. While every minister has the right to raise concern through the appropriate channels, public accusations of this magnitude must be grounded in facts and handled with the highest care and responsibility. Not only was this embarrassing and regrettable, but it was also a complete deviation from the agenda of the meeting. As a matter of fact, more than one member of parliament had to remind the minister of the actual agenda point. Even after the chair allowed the minister time to restructure his presentation in response to comments from members of parliament, very little relevant content was presented other than the statement that a request had been made to the Integrity Chamber. Madam Chair, that in itself should be a matter of concern for Parliament. I have taken careful note of the statements made by the Minister of VSA during that meeting. Today, I will address this matter responsibly and factually. Madam Chair, it is important that my position on the matter being deliberated today is placed in its proper context because this issue goes to the heart of fairness, accountability, and the rule of law. Therefore, allow me to refer briefly to a very well-known piece of recent history. A few years ago, in November 2023, two ministers, the then Prime Minister and the then Minister of VSA, took legal action against a political leader who had been publicly making serious and damaging allegations against them. These allegations were circulated publicly and were presented in a manner that could cause reputational and political harm. It was not for those ministers to disprove every accusation made against them. The burden was on the political leader making the allegations to provide evidence and substantiate his claims. In that case, the political leader could not provide that evidence, and as a result, the court ordered that those statements be rectified. This is a fundamental principle. If you make serious allegations, especially in the public domain, you must be prepared to support those allegations with facts, evidence, and proof. Why is this relevant to today's meeting? It is relevant because the same principles applies today on the floor of Parliament. That is the rule of law. That is how our judicial system works. That is how reputation are protected from reckless, unsupported, and damaging public statements, no matter who makes them. That is the standard I uphold. That is the standard I expect from every holder of public office, and that's the standard that we should all hold each other to. Today, questions may be asked to me based on the allegations of the Minister of VSA. However, it is important to remember that the Minister of VSA is the one who needs to provide evidence to support those allegations. It is not for me, nor for the members of Parliament, to chase rumors or defend against speculation. This is precisely what makes the present situation so concerning. On the one hand, I have been called to Parliament to deliberate on allegations and insinuations that have not been substantiated, while on the other hand, there is already a clear and acknowledged integrity concern involving the Minister of VSA. Madam Chair, I have thought long about how to proceed with the meeting of this afternoon, especially realizing that without going into some facts and developments, it would be very difficult for Parliament to understand why we ended up in this situation. So, to start with, this troubling matter concerning the involvement of the Chief of Staff of the Minister of VSA in an advisory role related to the allocation of a contract to, at the time, the newly formed company of her husband. Please listen good what I'm trying to explain you for you to understand the dynamics of the integrity that this Minister of VSA wants to discuss. This awarded contract was for a total amount of 48,510 Caribbean guilder for a period of 6 weeks. Specifically, February 4th from 2025 to March the 18th. Madam Chair, this is not a minor administrative mistake. The Chief of Staff did not simply happen to sign this particular advice. Based on the information available, the Chief of Staff was directly involved in the development of an advice. She herself emailed the companies, including the company of her husband, inviting him to bid on the terms of reference. Furthermore, based on information currently available, it appears that the company has received funds from the government that significantly exceeds the original contract amount of 48,510. In fact, over 83,000 Caribbean guilders was paid between January 2025 and September 2025, despite a contract of 48,510 for only 6 weeks, starting in February, ending in March, having payments going on till September, exceeding till 83,000 Caribbean guilders. This is a serious and concerning situation termed by the Minister of VSA as an unintentional oversight. Please, members of Parliament, if we advocate integrity and try to change this country, let's be an adult today and understand what this Prime Minister is trying to explain you. Madam Chair, I can guarantee the members of Parliament that I have the necessary evidence that shows this was not just an oversight. The information concerning this consultancy agreement came to light at the beginning of last year, including the reality that the Chief of Staff had signed and provided advice awarding the granting of the contract to her husband's company. Under Artikel 54 of the Landsverordening Materieel Ambtenarenrecht, the so-known LMA, a civil servant is prohibited from conducting business with government either directly or indirectly. To create the impression that this was merely an oversight, in my view, a clear attempt to downplay an incredible serious integrity matter is not to applaud. Madam Chair, it needs to be clear that when the situation came to light, it became necessary for the board of the URSM to become involved. It should also be noted that dealing with matters between a political party and a member of that political party is what all political parties should do based on their articles of incorporation. The board of the URSM has been actively engaged through extensive discussions, meetings, and written communications regarding serious and documented concerns within the cabinet of the Minister of ESA, and as such has not remained idle or indifferent, particularly where concerns related to conflicts of interest and compliance issues with Article 54 of the LMA are evident. It is the interest of the party that all members, and especially those that are members of parliament or ministers, perform their duty with integrity. It must be clearly understood that an absence of public discourse from the side of the URSM does not equal inaction. The Minister of ESA was informed to refrain from these kinds of activities and where necessary to retract these decisions. Madam Chair, on another note, since the Minister brought this up, and I consider this a serious breach of integrity, I would like to provide Parliament with a little more background information on other issue. Actually, the tender for a technical expert for the construction of the MHF Mental Health Foundation via SZW. I think it's very interesting for you to listen to this carefully for you all to understand the modus operandi. On October the 22nd, 2025, the SZW, that's our social and health insurance, published a public tender announcement to submit applications for an independent technical assessment of construction projects, under which was also the construction of the mental health facility. So we have an ad for a tendering for actually a technical assessment of construction projects, especially for the Mental Health Foundation. The deadline, here it comes, for submission was October the 29th, 2025. Mind you, for such an important tender, only 7 days were given. After some remarks from citizens concerning these 7 days, a second ad was immediately published concerning this public tender, in which an extension was given for another 7 days until November the 5th, 2025. Subsequently, 2 ministers within the Council of Ministers raised concerns regarding this published tender for a technical expert for the construction of the Mental Health Foundation project. The monthly fee for task was 8,299 Caribbean guilders and 96 cents, starting as of July the 1st, 2025, for a period of 2.5 years. And of course, I repeat, of course, the same individual, the husband of the Chief of Staff, won the tender. We are still talking about Article 54. On July 17, 2025, the Department of Legal Affairs confirmed that there was a significant, clear, and evident conflict of interest in awarding the TOR to this person based on Article 54 of the LMA. An internal meeting was therefore again held with the Minister of ESA and the board of the URSM. A caution was given to the minister, and the board is not involved in governance, but has its responsibility to caution its members. Although the tender was at the end not formally awarded, it is evident that the person in question nevertheless performed services in relation to overseeing the project of construction of the mental health building. So he got a tender, he won the tender, after we had a discussion with the minister, we said, but wait a minute, it's not possible what is going on here. Then he recatched himself and he did not award what the person won in the tender. So while the tender was not awarded, this person had been participating all of a sudden now in meeting with the World Bank for the construction of the Mental Health Foundation. So you have to explain me now, after having a contract for 6 weeks, how is it now possible that your contract is not awarded for the expertise for the technical supervision of that project, and all of a sudden now you are sitting in negotiations with the World Bank for the construction of the Mental Health Foundation. Therefore, extra payments were made other than the agreed 48,510. Following various signals and concerns, a decision was taken by me to implement a management oversight structure for the Mental Health Foundation. This structure consisted of a holistic approach, being the Secretary General of the Ministry of General Affairs, together with the Secretary General of the Ministry of Finance and the Chief of Staff of the Ministry of General Affairs, for them as a trio to be the focal point for communication with stakeholders towards the NRPB. Realize that the NRPB falls under the Minister of General Affairs and that the construction of the Mental Health Foundation falls under the NRPB. This decision that I communicated to say, but oh, wait a minute, let's do the things the right way. We are going to coordinate it different because there is no place for this gentleman in the negotiations and supervision of the construction of the Mental Health Foundation. We sent a communique to all stakeholders to inform them about the decision that I took to do it different concerning the supervision of the construction of the Mental Health Foundation. Shortly after that communication was circulated on that same day, a Facebook post was published by the husband of the Chief of Staff of the VSR Minister, ending with the statement, "I am going to end you." And on January the 7th, the next day, that statement was changed after he got some warning, I assume, "I will end you politically." He adds the word politically after it. This was followed on January the 7th, 2026, by an incident involving the Chief of Staff.
Prime Minister, if you give me a moment, I will allow MP Irian to make an interruption, but I would like to ask the cooperation of the members of Parliament, unless really urgent, to make the interruption so that the Prime Minister can make his entire presentation, and then, of course, members are free to, to continue the debate, the questioning, and everything else. But at this time, I allow MP Irian to make his interruption. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just to be clear, yes, I do understand we have an opportunity to ask questions, but in this case, we'll ask questions, the Prime Minister come back in 2-3 weeks, a month from now, where we want to get answers, and there's things that the Prime Minister is saying that we have a lot of people watching and we need some clarity. Prime Minister, you made it clear, he started off saying, through you, Madam Chair, that there was a conflict of interest, but then you also stated that the project fell under you as General Affairs and NRPB. So where's the conflict of interest if it fell directly under you and NRPB? Then wouldn't it have lied on you to ensure that it went well?
Thank you, MP Irian. Prime Minister, you may continue, and if you can respond to the interruption or the query by the MP, I invite you to do so as well.
No problem. Minister, coming back to your question, MP, coming back to your question, the NRPB has the responsibility for the construction of the Mental Health Foundation. That's a deal they had with their financing. And the NRPB falls under General Affairs, being the Prime Minister. And in that agreement, there is no deal that the Minister of VSA is involved in the construction of the facility. The minister has the responsibility to have the discussion, for example, I want 7 examination rooms. I want 4 consultation rooms for psychiatrists. I want 14 or 20 beds. Thus, for the functionality of the building, the VSA has all saying, but for the construction of the facility, to put it there, for the Minister of VSA to transform it into a functional building, catering mental care, that will become for the Minister of VSA. Pardon? Oh, the conflict of interest is, of course, in the construction, because in the, oh, sorry, Madam Chair.
I'll allow, Prime Minister, I'll allow the question by MP Aaron. You had started to respond, and I'll allow you to do that, Prime Minister, and then invite you to continue. But just since the discussion had started already on that particular query.
I think as a stakeholder, there is a lot to get when you are in the deal of construction, but there is nothing in the deal of just your passion and your goodwill to offer the best in care for a person. So why should this person, with a consultancy that is not based on a contract, sit in negotiations concerning the construction of the mental health facility? But now it comes about the threat. Why, if I take that decision to put this correctly under the right persons to supervise this construction, why all of a sudden someone would like to end me? And further now, on January the 7th, the next day, an incident happened between the Chief of Staff and myself. And I can tell you, I was threatened that day. And what was said to me is, Prime Minister, I'm officially informing you that you are on the list of my husband. I know 2 lists in life. A list that I remember as a child I used to make to invite my friends to come to my party, and I know a hit list. I do not know more lists in life. I was informed by her that I was officially on this list of her husband. Madam Chair, a threat is a threat to the person who receives it, not to the one who gives it. This incident served to further escalate an already serious situation. And all this in 24 hours after the Prime Minister, with good intention, tried to organize a great, correct process for the construction of a mental health foundation for the people of St. Martin. Following this incident, in consultation with P&O, I was advised to follow the necessary procedures, which ultimately led to the suspension of the Chief of Staff via a landsbesluit. I was also advised that government should obtain a copy of the consultancy contract between the Ministry of VSA and the same company in question, as well as all underlying advice and procurement procedures. This was necessary given that the matter could again constitute a violation of the same Article 54 of the Landsverordening Materieel Ambtenarenrecht by the civil servant involved. Despite, of course, several reminders from myself to the VSA Minister to provide a copy of that contract with the consultancy company of that husband of the Chief of Staff, a copy was never provided by the Minister. Instead, the Minister referred my office to the Department of Information Management and the DIF Department, Documentatie en Informatievoorziening, as we call it, to retrieve the contract signed on February 4th, 2025. I must also mention that I filed an official complaint by the public prosecutor and the Lacroes in regard to the threat made against me. And I think it's important for everybody to know that for combating integrity, to try to be for integrity and condemning and working and fighting corruption, no one is going to threaten this Prime Minister. It is further important to note that after the threat and after the order maatregel imposed on the Chief of Staff of VSA cabinet, Minister Brug circulated a communication to the staff of the ministry instructing them now to send all emails to a non-governmental personal address of the Chief of Staff. And this is what we call governmental integrity. I have a problem with that. Together with the board of the URSM, I, in my role as political leader, and together with the MPs of the URSM faction, met again with the Minister of VSA and informed him that this was against government's regulation.
Prime Minister, with your indulgence, I will allow MP Ottley to make an interruption with the same request to MP Iran, of course.
Thank
MP
you.
Ottley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible. The Honourable Prime Minister started his notification saying that even certain MPs had to remind the Minister of VSA the topic.
The ministers, not them.
The Minister at the time. But, Madam Chair, I was one of the MPs that told the Minister of VSA at the time, you're swaying from the topic. As one of the initiators of this meeting, and I said it, I do not want to get in the back and forth with the URSM saga. And what I'm hearing today is basically what we untangled in the Ministry of VSA's meeting. Today's meeting was based on the accusations, the integrity breach, and those things put forward. I hear the Honourable Prime Minister said the responsibility is on the accuser. So does that mean the Honourable Prime Minister is not going to address the integrity accusations? If so, then we can just start with the questioning as far as my part. But to be here for another 4 hours to hear about Brooke, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley. Prime Minister, the Member of Parliament asks a specific question, so
Yes.
if you can address that, and then...
No problem.
to
Madam, I can
continue.
understand that these are sensitive things, and we are not in a culture that we can speak and deliberate openly about these sensitive topics. So, but okay, if the Minister, is the Member of Parliament wants me to go in the accusations that he had towards me, I'm ready to go now, and I will proceed instead of bringing 2 to 3 more examples about the modus operandi of the Minister of VSA. But if you want later in the discussion for me to add them, I will be willing to do that for you. I will now address some of the allegations regarding lack of integrity on my part now that I was accused of. First, my responsibility as Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs is to ensure and safeguard the unity of government policy, wat they call bewaren van eenheid van regeringsbeleid. That's my task. Secondly, as Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, I have a responsibility to act with due diligence, what they call zorgvuldigheid, especially when concerns arise involving conduct of government employees. It is my duty to ensure that the institution remains healthy and functional by upholding the highest standards of conduct, safeguarding due process, and resisting the undermining of lawful authority. A statement was made concerning the former Secretary General of the Ministry of General Affairs. That's the first one that he was accusing me of, also in his letter that he sent towards the URSM. In regard to this matter, the following. I have been accused by the Minister of VSA of a lack of integrity for bringing the former Secretary General from AZ into my cabinet as a legal advisor, while being aware that he had been dismissed by the previous government and that legal proceedings were still ongoing. I'm accused of that. For the sake of clarity, Madam Chair, I will repeat what I already shared during a press briefing last year. Firstly, the former S.J. was not hired as a civil servant in the Ministry of General Affairs. He was hired as a legal advisor in my politically appointed cabinet. That's one. So I do not see where the minister is coming from. Secondly, the Council of Ministers decided that all matters related to the court case between government and the former S.J., while he is sitting in my cabinet, would be handled by the Minister of Justice, in this case, Minister Nathalie Tacklin, and not by myself as Minister of General Affairs, in order, of course, to avoid any conflict of interest. And by the way, thirdly, the former S.J. won his court case at the end, and his dismissal was nullified. He was ultimately reinstated in his role as Secretary General of the Ministry of General Affairs, and unfortunately for me, he had to leave the cabinet. That is an accusation. This information is known to the Minister of E.S.A., since he was also a member of the Council of Ministers when all these decisions were taken. I have a second accusation with regard to the employment of a legislative lawyer at the Department of Legal Affairs and that person's secondment to the Prime Minister to draft several laws. I have been accused of bringing this legislative lawyer into the service of government without a tender procedure. Listen good what I'm telling you. He is accusing me to take somebody in service of government without a tender procedure. I do not know the tender procedure to take a civil servant in service. Madam Chair, it should be noted that a tender process is not required for a person to be hired into the service of government. The hiring of this candidate followed the appropriate procedure and was executed with the Department of PLO. This person has been hired and seconded to the Prime Minister to work on several legislations for the future. I ask that legislator, please, let's start being serious with this country. Let's start working on the healthcare professional registry, what we call the BIG. Secondly, let's start now the screening for candidate ministers. As you know, after all election, it's a whole discussion about the guidelines that has to be followed for the screening of candidate ministers. Thirdly, let's work on the placement of political assistants in the cabinet of ministers. Fourth, the discussion always about electoral reform. Let's start working on that electoral reform. And at the end also, the democratic deficit. The absence of legislation on this topic has been plaguing government after government since 2010. And that is the reason this government decided to pick up this legislation and finally address them. And for that, the Minister of E.S.A. is accusing me of integrity breach. The third example, and what he accused me for, is the BIG registration, the Healthcare Professional Registry. That name I invented myself, and everybody already is using this ECPR, the HCPR. Given my long-standing involvement in the healthcare sector and my passion for this sector, I, together with several healthcare professionals, began working on a custom-made healthcare professional registry for St. Martin as far back as 2017. Personally, I have experienced what it means and how it handicaps the people of this country if we remain sticking to this big registration from the Netherlands. Because in this concept, it's only the Dutch can come work here. while great professionals from Santo Domingo, Venezuela, Colombia cannot come to work here because the big organization is singing other song. By the beginning of the tenure of the Minister Brug in November 2024, the draft HCPR, the Healthcare Professional Registry, was almost ready. This draft legislation had reached so far because of years of input from several stakeholders that I work with in St. Martin's Healthcare. Indeed, I requested that the Secretary General of the Ministry of VSA allow this legislation and legislative lawyer to be the legislative draftman in a project of TWO, considering the fact that most of the work on the draft legislation had already been done. It was practical to use the legislative draftsman who had already been involved throughout the process to draft a custom-made legislation for country St. Martin. By doing that, he is accusing me of hijacking the Ministry of VSA. A man that is fighting all from 2017 to see if we can get a great healthcare professional registry for St. Martin, how we can involve people of the vicinity, Colombia, Venezuela, to come help us with our healthcare. And now I'm being accused of hijacking a ministry because, sorry, I was working since 2017 on a draft legislation because I realized, although I was educated in Europe, that still we have to actually amplify our interest to see how we can work with professionals of the neighborhood. There is nothing unethical or unlawful about trying to explain that work proposed to be started had, in fact, already been substantiated in advance. It is noteworthy to mention that the draft legislator that was seconded to the Prime Minister to be part of the healthcare professional registry legislation has also formally been approved by the Council of Ministers. So when we decided that we're going to continue with the healthcare professional registry, the Council of Ministers and the Minister of VSA was involved in it. We also agreed that this legislator will continue to be involved with other legislators to work further on this healthcare professional registry. Also, it is important to note that the drafting of legislation does not require a tender process. The minister is accusing me that I'm working since 2017 on a legislation that I think I understand what the necessities of St. Martin are. And now he is accusing me that I started in 2017 out of my own with people interested and engaged with healthcare on a professional registry draft legislation. And now he is accusing me of wrongdoing by starting this draft legislation without a tender. And for that, I'm not a man of integrity. Any minister, any parliamentarian can draft legislation without a tender process. In this process, consultations, by the way, that were held, we involved Minister Brug. We involved the TWO, the TWO, the Tijdelijke Werkorganisatie. We involved the TWO together with Minister Brug of VSA. And also, there were stakeholder meetings were held in March and in May 2025, where the Minister of VSA made even opening remarks on the draft legislation framework that we were working on. An official letter was sent to the Minister in July 2025, thanking him for his active participation in those sessions, and inviting him for a meeting for us to discuss the path forward. Even that letter I have to show you. Madam Chair, in my opinion, it was not necessary to start an entirely new trajectory for the HCPR, given the long-standing work that had been ongoing since 2017 to develop a legislation actually tailored for the people of St. Martin. The importance of a custom-made HCPR has always been clear. Such an approach remains the most beneficial for the country, regardless of who ultimately funds the project, because the legislation must first and forehand serve St. Martin's healthcare and the long-term public interest. For MP Ottley, I have a fourth accusation regarding allegations concerning directives issued to civil servants within the Ministry of VSA by me concerning granting the authorization of medical professionals to practice in St. Martin. So he is accusing me, allegations concerning directives from my side that I had towards civil servants within the Ministry of VSA concerning the granting of authorization for medical professionals to practice in St. Martin. Let's go. St. Martin is facing a real and growing concern regarding the availability of general practitioners. I can tell you that because I have been there. Several family doctors are nearing retirement or have retired recently. I'm going to name you a row of names for you to realize what is going on here with the occupation of family doctors to service the first line here in St. Martin being the family practice. I'm going to recall you Dr. Datema, very known doctor in St. Martin, retired. Dr. Van der Waag, a while already. Dr. Swanston, nobody knows. She stopped too. Dr. Chadin, very known name, stopped. Dr. Spencer stopped. Dr. Bowman stopped recently. And Dr. Mercedina, understanding the necessities of the people of St. Martin, is telling everybody in VSA, guys, we are running out of time. There will be a moment that there will not be sufficient family doctors to help us with our healthcare challenges of our people. There is a shortage of family doctors serving the community, and there was no evident strategy in place to recruit sufficient new family doctors. Taking this into account in my capacity as, and now it comes, Deputy Minister of VSA, in the absence of the Minister of VSA, that means I'm replacing him, I signed an advice niet akkoord. That advice, being niet akkoord in English, is not in agreement, by also adding a memo to my motivation why I'm signing this advice niet akkoord. And this advice was brought to me for signing, and I said I am not going to go in agreement with this advice. This advice was regarding the denial of an application of a doctor to practice as an independent family doctor on the basis that they did not have the formal specialization as family doctor. So there is a Dutch doctor here on the island, working here since 2021, by the way, as a family doctor, doing a great job, because I know her since the time that I was working in the hospital. She used to work by the emergency room, and then by the Department of Surgery and Orthopedics, and then internal medicine. And then she went to work as a family doctor. And so we know who this lady is. This doctor had maintained a good level of professional conduct in our community for several years and was already working as a family doctor here on the island. And now realizing the group of people that I said just retired, 6 to 7 doctors. Having now a young, dynamic doctor coming to the island, they want me to sign. If I didn't know the person, I would say, okay, till there I'm getting. I know this professional, and I said, I'm going to assume responsibility as the Deputy Minister of VSA to give the people of St. Martin what they deserve, and that is a doctor, a general practitioner on the field. For that, the Minister of ESA is actually accusing me from hijacking the ministry. I think he should know better. And by the way, there is an Article 3 that I used when I signed NEAT Accords. And that Article 3 of the National Ordinance regulating the practice of medicine. De landsverordening regelende de uitoefening van de geneeskunde provides a basis for deviation to approve a doctor to work in St. Martin.
Minister, I will ask you to hold your last word there as I allow MP Durant to make a brief interruption. MP Durant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prime Minister, I'm not sure if you misspoke, but I think you resonated with some colleagues when you mentioned that because you know the individual, you sign and you take personal responsibility. So am I to understand through you, Madam Chair, if you didn't know the individual, they won't get an opportunity, even if they were qualified? Because I think that that would be setting a dangerous precedent and an unlevel playing field if people have to know the Prime Minister in order to get through. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Durant. Prime Minister, I invite you also, if you can, to address MP Durant's.
MP Durant, and that's why since 2017, I'm working on this healthcare professional registry for us not to get ourselves in this discussion. And because I'm taking a risk, I was very grateful to know this candidate, who she was. But that is the
Prime
reason
Minister,
that...
sorry, just through me to
Yes.
the MP
Yeah.
in responding to
Madam
the MP.
Chair, that is through you to the Member of Parliament, that is the reason actually that I'm very eager to get this legislation established, ratified, for us to get more healthcare professionals for country St. Martin. Madam Chair, I now turn the role of the chair of the Council of Ministers, being me. He accused me for that one too. I can inform Parliament and remind the members of Parliament who have also served as ministers in the past, which to my count are 8 members sitting on this floor, that based on the rules of order of the Council of Ministers, Article 16, it is the authority of the chair, the Prime Minister, to establish the agenda for the meetings of the Council of Ministers. Therefore, in accordance with the explanatory notes of Article 16, if the chair considers that some discussions need to take place before adding the advice as an agenda point, the chair is entitled to approach the minister and have this discussion in order to provide clarity or reach to an agreement how to proceed with this advice. This is not bullying, this is not hijacking, this is not blackmailing or abuse of power. This is the authority of the Prime Minister of St. Martin and the chair of the Council of Ministers. Madam Chair, this clarification is important because it demonstrates a broader pattern in this matter. Facts are being taken out of context without realizing what the rules and regulations are. Internal government processes are being presented as something they are not. And selective information is being used to create a public narrative of wrongdoing where the record does not support such a conclusion. The fact that I withhold a file, an advice, moves to the Minister of ESA, one-on-one, discuss it with him, see how we can get to a better agreement, better efficiency in working towards whatever topic, should never be interpreted as a Prime Minister that hijacks or bullies others. It's my prerogative. It's in Article 16, so it's just a role that I have and I make use of. For example, the memo referenced by the Minister of VSA and held up by MP Ottley. That is a memo dated the 15th, in which I proposed to the Minister a proposal to get to an agreement how to move forward with the healthcare professional registry. I write the letter, I put 2 names, and I do not send this draft to stakeholders. I send, as has been stated, I send this draft to the Secretariat of the Council of Ministers. I tell Cassandra, please take this draft, let us discuss it, and if we come to an agreement, I will sign it together with the Minister of VSA. The Minister disagreed with that draft. It's possible. He comes with a second draft and he writes a second one on the 17th. I wrote one on the 15th, he writes a second one on the 17th, and both of them goes to the Council of Ministers. At the end of the day, nor the 15th draft nor the 17th draft has been agreed between me and the Minister of VSA, but the Council of Ministers came to a conclusion and decided that we will make another agreement to move forward with the healthcare professional registry, in which also the draftsmen that I just took in service will be part also included in the process to develop this healthcare professional registry. And the Minister of VSA was sitting in those Council of Ministers meetings. He knew about the letter of the 15th. I knew about the letter of the 17th. We both knew that both letters were retracted. We came with an other solution through the a majority, to say then that I'm pressuring him and hijacking him and doing unlawful things. Please, that's not the case. Madam Chair, looking back, sorry.
Prime Minister, you realized already, and I will give the floor to MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would just like to, if the PM would clarify one thing. In him explaining and referring to the draftsman, the PM just said, and I quote, the draftsman that I took in service. So can the PM explain what he meant by I took in service? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP York. Prime Minister, if you can respond, please, and then you may continue.
The draftsman is because in the agreement that we had in the beginning of the governing period, we realized that there were a lot of hiccups with some legislation. And we decided that we're going to try to get a draftsman, to see, and I mentioned the 5 legislations that we wanted to see if we can finalize them, because it's a very tiresome, large trajectory to draft legislation. But if we do not have a person engaged to try to go the legislative wish list that we have, it's going to be very difficult. And in 4 years from now, we're going to have challenges again with the BIG, with the placement of political assistants in cabinet of ministers, with the screening of ministers, with the democratic deficit, with the electoral reform, and that's the reason that we decided that we have to see how we can push things in a way to really see if we can achieve something in the coming 4 years. Madam Chair, looking back on this whole event, the Minister of VSA has made serious criticism of the party, its leadership, and its integrity. He has publicly accused the organization of failing to uphold its own standard, of acting hypocritically, and of applying double standards, while also publicly making serious allegations against me in my capacity as Prime Minister of St. Martin.
Prime Minister?
Yes.
I do this to limit the members of parliament having to interrupt you by using interruptions. And I ask you on behalf of MP York, his question had to do with a part of your statement taken into service by me. So if you can.
Sorry.
Yes.
I spoke in that way, but it's by government, of course.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
I'm just the primus inter pares in the Council of Ministers, that's all. No, he's not a primus. He is inter pares. Yet, despite all of this, the Minister of E.S.A. maintains that he has no intention of resigning. Members of Parliament, please. There is accusation by the leader of a political party, by the Prime Minister of the country. It has to do with criticism of integrity, of bullying, of maintaining double standards. That is what the minister is accusing me of. Despite all of this, the Minister of E.S.A. maintains that he has no intention to resign. That is strange. You are part of a group of people that you are actually dubbing their integrity. You're talking about their double standards. You're talking that the leader is hijacking and bullying, and you do in writing send us a message that you are not resigning of this political party. Madam Chair, that position is for me contradictory. It is impossible to justify. One cannot publicly denounce an organization as lacking integrity, question its leadership, accuse it of hypocrisy, and then simultaneously insist on remaining within that same organization as if trust, confidence, and political credibility have not been fundamentally damaged. I think that does not add up. As a matter of fact, it raises serious questions about the minister's own sincerity, about his judgment, and about his integrity. If the minister truly believes in what he has said, then the logic and principled course of action would be to separate himself from the organization and the political party, URSM. To publicly condemn the party while seeking to remain within and benefit from its political platform is not a position grounded in principle. It is a position rooted in convenience and opportunism. Because if you disagree, keep the honor to yourself. If the party does not share integrity, keep the honor to yourself. If you have a leader that bullies, that hijacks, keep the honor to yourself. But don't accuse the organization of those dimensions and you deny to reject. That means that you are using double standards and you're using the political platform that you're on for your convenience and the opportunism. Madam Chair, this government has consistently stated that integrity, transparency, and accountability must guide our governance. It is particularly important that we remain consistent in our approach and ensure that we do not turn a blind eye when serious questions arise regarding compliance with the LMA and the Penal Code of St. Martin. The fact that a minister from the same political party as me used his immunity in Parliament to slander the Prime Minister while attempting to distract from serious concerns regarding his own conduct is something very serious. It should be clear to everyone that this is unacceptable. Such behavior has no place in public office. Madam Chair, as I come to the closing of my opening statements, the issue being deliberated today must be anchored in a proper foundation, one of facts, evidence, and the rule of law. Unsubstantiated allegations have been made against the Prime Minister. At the same time, there is before Parliament and the public a clear and acknowledged integrity concern involving the Minister of ESR. A concern that cannot and should not be minimized, ignored, or dismissed as a mere oversight. Madam Chair Lady, I want the people of St. Martin to understand something clearly. Integrity is not just a word that belongs in law, in policies, or parliamentary debates. Integrity is personal. It is the compass that guides how we lead, how we serve, and how we treat the trust that people place in us. To the people of St. Martin, that may be listening today, I want you to know that my commitment to this country remains unchanged. My focus remains on serving you, protecting the integrity of government and ensuring that the institutions of this country continue to function with fairness, professionalism, and accountability. My position is clear. I welcome clarifying questions from the members of Parliament, and I will answer, guided by the facts, whatever question I get. I will uphold the standard that every holder of public office must be held to. Serious claims must be supported by serious evidence, and integrity in government must be defended not only in words, but in action. And so, Madam Chair Lady, I will continue to lead in the same way I have always believed leadership should be carried out, with calmness, under pressure, with respect for the people, with faith in the truth, and with integrity at the center of every responsibility entrusted to me. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Prime Minister, thank you for your presentation. Members of Parliament, we will adjourn for 5 minutes and then we will continue with this meeting. This meeting is adjourned for 5 minutes. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister and support staff, good evening and welcome back to this meeting after a brief adjournment in the meeting that was requested, in which the Prime Minister was asked to be present. We had a presentation by the Prime Minister, and we now go over to the members of Parliament to ask any questions regarding what has been presented and on this topic. I go over and I give the floor to MP Ottley. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister for, I don't see the light. Okay, I see the light now. Thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister for his answers. Madam Chair, let me start by saying this. The Honorable Prime Minister started his speech by saying, when accusations are brought, it is up to the accuser to present the proof of such. This is true. I was also one that took someone to court for slander and misrepresentation of my name. And both my lawyer and my judge rightfully said, the burden of proof is not on me. But I said I have a responsibility because I am a public figure. And I presented what I needed to present to clear my name. See, Madam Chair, we call the accusations of the Honorable Minister of VSR baseless, no proof. But Madam Chair, black and white is what bothers me. Black and white is what you cannot erase. When I see here letters to the TWO, letters to the relevant stakeholders indicating of agreements and agreeing to change and amend requirements and criteria, and saying, I agree, and the Honorable Minister of VSR agrees, and then 2 minutes later, the Honorable Minister of VSR has to say, I do not agree. I do not agree, and I did not agree. When we speak of blackmail or advices getting withheld from COM, again, the Prime Minister said it's baseless and it's not true. But we have numerous emails from the Minister of VSR asking and pleading for the advice to be placed on COM. Dated December 17th, by means of this memorandum, in my capacity of Minister of Public Health, I wish to formally inform you the div number was submitted to the Council of Ministers several weeks ago for proposal. Given the time-sensitive nature of this matter, I find it necessary to outline the consequences should the advice be placed later than a specific date. Here we have, again, the Prime Minister allegedly, well, they're saying allegedly no more because the proof is there. This came off a truck for me. So the Prime Minister sending texts to the SG of VSR requesting to change information on a tour or a tender to fit and suit a specific candidate. See, Madam Chair, the Honorable Prime Minister started by saying, civil servant, the person is a civil servant. And this is where it gets a bit funny. Because when the tender went out, the person was not a civil servant, but the person worked at the Council of Advice. Originally, this same person registered for the tender and was disqualified, did not make it to be the project manager. I'm not going to call the person's name. After that is when the alleged pressure came to put this person as a draftsman. And the amount was over the compatibility maximum, therefore needed a bid. Madam Chair, to everyone's surprise, the good person was then hired in Yezetin Way. I would like to ask the Honorable Prime Minister, did a tender go out for that position in Yezetin Way? I see the Prime Minister shake his head saying no. Any job vacancies. went out publicly, or this person was just hired into Yezetin way. Madam Chair, my colleague hit the nail on the head when he listened closely and the Prime Minister said the person that I hired. Because before this meeting, I also did my research and I made some calls. And persons within the ministry, in the department, do feel that they were pressured. You see, I was the Minister of VESA, and you did mention Article 3. Correctly so. It is of the discretion of the minister. But Honorable Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, you were the acting minister. And while you held authority, did you consult with the Minister of VESA before taking such decisions? Because ethically, I was also a Wardenayman for many other ministries, and before taking any decision that reverses the ministry's decision, I would consult with the sitting minister. So did you consult? The person that you speak of, it is very, very worrying to hear the Prime Minister said, if I didn't know this person, I wouldn't sign it, but I know them, so I sign it. Minister Brookno knew Mr. Laville. We have to be careful what we speak of. The confidence you have in this person because you know them circumvents. It does not circumvent, because what I was looking to hear is the reasoning, but not because you know them through you, Madam Chair. To my recollection, or to my knowledge, or the information given to me, the person was registered as an ER and was working as a GP illegally. It was also advised for the person to do uplading. And I was told that the Honorable Acting Minister of VESA, the Honorable Prime Minister, refused this. Is this true? Madam Chair, accusations, black and white. I have some questions. Can the Prime Minister confirm or deny whether he called an urgent meeting to demand the adjustment of the term of reference in order for the Prime Minister's candidate and profile to fit each other? Did the Prime Minister personally send proposed adjustments to the Secretary General of VESA? How is the person contracted to create the draft of the bill presented by the Prime Minister to VESA? Is the person being paid by public funds? So again, how is this person contracted under the Prime Minister to present the information to VESA? Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, did you or did you not ask the TWO representatives on different occasions to bypass the ongoing bid procedure? Did you not tell on different occasions, including the meeting that was held with the representatives, to bypass this process? Did you or did you not provide confidential information on the BIF to this specific candidate at the time they were working at the Council of Advice? In doing my research, it was also told that the person had pricing and specific information. Allegedly, when they asked how did the person know this confidential information, they said, ask your PM. Confidential information. I know this information I got here didn't come from Brooke. This came from different research within persons in the team and in the ministries. Very alarming. Ask your PM. Allegedly. How do you explain the instructions to the Secretary General to amend the tender? What legal powers do the Prime Minister have in our current democracy to withhold another minister's advice from CALM. Maybe it's possible, maybe not. But one thing I do know, there's multiple emails from Minister Bruch to the Honorable Prime Minister asking for the advice to be placed on CALM. So where there's smoke, there's fire. Madam Chair, we speak and listen to the Honorable Prime Minister say, Chief of Staff husband, Chief of Staff husband, conflict of interest. Then turn around and say, the project was not under VSA, but under the Prime Minister. But then, Madam Chair, it was just not too long ago that we were here asking who had the contract for Christmas lights. Husband, wife, board member, presidents of boards, not presidents of boards, not legal. And I say, well, good for the goose, good for the gander. There are claims that the Prime Minister, Madam Chair, has issued directive to civil servants within the Ministry of VSA to grant permissions to GPs, medical professionals, and so forth. I understand the urgency. Through you, Madam Chair, I do. Sitting in that position, I do understand the urgency. But I do understand there's means and ways to get things done and do it properly. Again, I will give the Prime Minister another opportunity to then motivate possibly to us why, other than I knew the person. I knew the person. And I just stated, you can correct me if I was wrong, was this person working illegally as a GP? Very important, because you mentioned the time frame. And was the person registered as an ER? Did the ministry offer the opportunity of uplighting for this person? And will the same urgency be taken for the others that were denied? Madam Chair, I sat here today. I heard a whole story of the minister of VSA did this, the minister of VSA did that, and I told the minister of VSA, if you gotta go, you gotta go. Nothing I could do about it at this point. Coalition have 9. If you gotta go, you gotta go. But with these accusations, he shouldn't be the only one packing his Georgie bundle. He shouldn't. And I say today, you have an opportunity through you, Madam Chair, to come back with answers. But be very cognizant. Because when I was driving today, a lot of papers are flying off a bus. A lot of them land in my front seat. A lot. So be very cognizant of what we say. When we say no proof, when we say fabrication. I have seen where the court offered time just because somebody said, hey, Minister, did you pay this person? We have to be very careful when it comes to these accusations and what we're doing. I remember sitting here, Madam Chair, asking for information, and the Honorable Prime Minister sat right there and said, I don't think that information is relevant. We pick and we choose what we want to divulge to the members of Parliament. When we want to divulge it. When we can go to Yezetin Way. When not to go to Yezetin Way. Government of convenience. Integrity. We have seen it from the previous government, Luke Mercelina Cabinet 1. Complaints of meddling, involvement in everybody's ministry. At that time, his own Minister of Justice said, in everybody's ministry, but nothing coming out of general affair. Today, I guess GB passed like hot potato now. And Prime Minister Marcelina's way or the highway. Or the highway. Madam Chair, through you to the Honorable Prime Minister. How do you think the working relationship will be now with the Department of VSR moving forward? Obviously, I heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak about Minister Brooke not being willing to resign. And I take it as the Honorable Prime Minister would like him to resign. But how would the relationship be with the department? How is your relationship with the department at the moment? Madam Chair, when I look at this government, contract here, contract there, contract for this person. And there are articles in the policy that allow you, because St. Martin is a small place. And you can sign for family members up to a certain degree. It's there. But my thing is, we have watched the URSM dirty laundry play out in the public. And if you let people talk long enough, they're going to tie themselves up. And what I mean by that is saying, because I know the person I signed for it, by saying the person I hire, what is the person, the contract person or the draft person, what are they being paid? Where are they being paid from as a consultant? And if no vacancy went out for this person to be hired at EAZ, how did that process go? Picking and choosing and doing what we want. Madam Chair, this meeting was called by myself, my faction, and the No faction. But this situation was created by them. The URSM, the candidates, the board that brought it to the public. And you know why I don't feel for nobody, Madam Chair? Because everybody was holding each other's secret. Now everybody know, ain't no way, after almost 2 years, only over the past month, everybody know about violations. Everybody know about integrity breaches. Everybody know about abuse of power. Only the past month? Nah. Because it's you tell on me, I'm going to tell on you, Madam Chair. And there's more to come out. Damning information to come out. Madam Chair, I sat here a year ago and I asked over and under about GB and the signing to get those generators. Because it didn't go right then neither. That the board had to backdate. And I was told, oh, you can't get the information. You won't get the information. I know why I wasn't given the information, Madam Chair. Because I know when everything went berserk, when it was found out what was done with these generators, $1 million plus, and how the procedure went. He know it happening to the public of St. Martin. He know. But it's now somebody gets squeezed. So we sit here today, and the VSR could speak on his integrity and blame the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister could speak on his integrity and blame VSR, but everybody knew all along. But you had to dance to their tune. And from the time you don't dance to their tune, Madam Chair, you gotta go. Perfect. You gotta go. I said it, and I'm gonna leave the public with this. A leopard ain't gonna change your spots. Lyndon Lewis, when he was minister and stood up for himself, he had to go. Rolex Jr., you gotta go. Emil Lee, you gotta go. Don't government, you have to go. Today, Minister Brooke, you gotta go. And it's just gonna be a matter of time till the buck passes. And to the members that don't listen and don't go along, my message to you, you too will have to go. Just going to be a matter of time. Let's wait and see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley. I look at the next person indicating their need to speak. MP Peterson, just to get clarity here, you would have been but you would have to MP Peterson is the next member of parliament according to the speakers list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put my name in case I have comments in the second round. I don't have any comments at this moment for the Prime Minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Peterson. And for right now, members, is anyone else going to sign in the speakers list? Once I start to say that I'm closing the session, it's going to be closed. So I invite you now, if you're going to. I will, members, if I'll not be playing any now, so if you're going to sign in, MP Roseberg is signing in to speak. I give MP Roseberg the opportunity to get to her desk and then give her the floor. MP Roseberg.
Thank you, Chair Lady. As mentioned, it's not a cat and mouse game, so I was going to speak and I will be speaking. What I have seen and what has been brought forward by the Prime Minister, questions that were asked by colleagues present here today, and also in regards to the serious matter that we have at hand. I already asked it in the previous meeting with the VSA Minister, because a lot has been brought forward, a lot of allegations have been made, and also by their colleagues in regards to silence is consent. And I would like to make it clear that I would like to know the procedure, because it was mentioned that several meetings has taken place, and I would like to know through you, Madam Chair, from the Prime Minister, yes, there is paperwork on paper. Yes, a lot has been said by the VSA Minister. A lot has been said today, but to clearly make it clear, how will this relationship, if this relationship would have to continue, how will this relationship function, and how will the Prime Minister, as head of the CON, being able to secure that the country of St. Martin will not be at risk? So to clarify through you, Madam Chair, is there any way to be seen that this relationship can work? Because through the presentation given by the VSA Minister, also through the presentation given today here, and what was brought forward, I would like to know clearly in what way this can function, and if it cannot function, how it will be ensured that country St. Martin will not be at risk. Other than that, serious allegations were made based on the previous MP mentioning that several documents fall on his car, or how he formulated it. I have seen, I looked to the right and I saw paperwork. I'm not sure what that paperwork entails, but I would like to await those answering, because if you make certain allegations on the floor of Parliament in regards to several persons, I believe the Prime Minister should have the right to answer those questions directly, so that we know where we stand in regards to those answering, because it's unfortunate if it will be just left in the air without the Prime Minister being able to answer in regards to that matter. Other than that, I believe that based on the answers that will be given by the Prime Minister, I will know how to move forward in regards to answering in-depth questions, if those questions will be there. So therefore, I will leave this moment to give the Prime Minister the opportunity to answer the questions that were presented so far. And if there is any need for additional questions, if the answers that were given are not sufficient, then I will be asking those additional questions. So therefore, Prime Minister, seeing that I would like to avoid for unnecessary repeating of questions, hopefully those questions were all noted so that we can get a clear view and that we all know where we stand and how we can move forward in the benefit of Country St. Martin, because I believe that should be the focus point. Country St. Martin, above self, Effie has mentioned all, but now we have to make sure that we practice that as well. And just for a note, if certain things are being mentioned in regards to being silent and not making things clear, I just would like to make it clear, seeing that we are here in a public meeting, not because often persons choose the route to make certain things clear publicly, that only means that it has been discussed. Because for the ones that know me, I am a person that makes things clear internally and also makes things clear to see if things can be resolved. So just to set the record straight, not because I'm not loud in public, that means I'm not loud when I need to be loud. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. I continue and I give the floor to MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair. Honorable Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, I learned a phrase or a saying when I was an immigration officer from a police officer that was teaching me at the time, Mr. Norwin Villadiel. Listen, think, talk. I've listened over the past weeks in the media, here in Parliament, rumors on the street. I had a lot of time thinking. Madam Chair will say this: we just came back from Canada and I get no rest. The people of this country is hurting. When a mother and father is fighting at home, the children are neglected, Madam Chair. The people of this country, Madam Chair, at this moment are neglected. Madam Chair, when I sit down and also reflect on the dirty politics back in August, after August election 2024, I can stand here today and smile, Madam Chair, that I am so grateful that I'm not part of this mess. Everything happens for a reason, Madam Chair. How can you have a functioning minister or parliamentarian back then today to be part of this mess? Madam Chair, where are we going? Madam Chair, you are also one of the biggest leaders in this country. What is going on? Madam Chair, the 2x4 government, the 2x4 government left Lyndon Lewis out. And look what we have today. A country that is filthy, a calm that has no type of cohesion. Nothing ain't happening for the people of this country. We have ministers blaming GB, but no ministers ain't sitting down together to see how we can make one part to give the people of this country relief, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we are talking about integrity, the integrity of our honorable institutions. One person told me one day, you all are not honorable. I say, yes, I don't consider myself honorable, but the institution that I represent is honorable. And integrity should be upheld to its highest degree. When I'm going to hear what's going on with Minister Brooke, and then I'm going to hear from the Prime Minister on this other end, now it makes me wonder who really has integrity. Which minister within the URSM really have integrity at this moment when it comes to serving this country on its highest degree? Madam Chair, I listened to the Prime Minister's statement, and he mentioned after all the alleged stuff Minister Brooke was doing, the board spoke to him. Madam Chair, trying to understand, how does a board be involved in the people's business? Discussions that is supposed to be held in the Council of Ministers. Madam Chair, we're talking about integrity. We're not talking about in the people's business, not party problems, not party issues. Decisions that the minister probably made unlawfully according to the Prime Minister. How is it that those discussions reach the board? And that is the board and not the Council of Ministers. I want people to understand me correctly. That why didn't the Council of Ministers, I didn't hear this in the presentation of the Prime Minister, brought it to the attention of the minister that we do not, as a COM, agree with the decisions that you're making. Madam Chair, I have one other question to the Prime Minister. With all that is being said again about integrity, was an official complaint filed at the prosecutor's office with the Lacroes, with whichever entity? I don't want to hear about no integrity chamber. I don't want to hear about that. Integrity chamber will give us what? A report? Non-binding? Advice to who? Madam Chair, if there's a breach of integrity to the highest level in our offices, I am a national detective, Madam Chair, as we all know, on a leave of absence to sit down in this seat. And I, again, will repeat, I would like to know if an official complaint was filed on the dear Minister of VSR based on the alleged allegations that I'm standing and listening here today for the past couple of weeks and months. Again, his head is on a chopping block. I think it's already chopped off. But I will say this, Madam Chair. I will reiterate what my colleague said. If I, as a national detective, as a detective for 19 years, have to do my own research on the Prime Minister, and although allegations are founded, then his head too will be chopped off. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I continue with a list of speakers, and I give the floor to MP Waver. MP Waver, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, good evening to Grafia, Honorable Madam Chair, Honorable Prime Minister, support staff, my honorable colleagues here today, and those here in the Tribune and listening and viewing via whichever media. A lot was said today. I'll refrain from my questions for the next round, but I just had a clarity, I guess, from I see some documents were brought forth. Are these the same confidential documents that were given to Parliament today by the Honourable Minister of VSR that are now being shared on the floor of Parliament, or are these separate that certain MPs received via whichever means that were leaked to us? Thank you, and that's it. I'll refrain the questioning when I hear the answers from the Prime Minister in the second round. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Waver. And just for the sake of the public, allow me to explain. I hear MP Waver is referencing documents provided to Parliament, and I wish to state for the members of Parliament who might not have yet taken note of that fact that a file of documents, if I can call it that, was submitted officially to Parliament by Minister Brugge with the request that the information contained therein be handled confidentially. Once that request is done by a minister, what happens is that then via our Secretary General, not even Secretariat, but the Secretary General sitting to my left, members are then invited, if they care to peruse this documentation. I have not done so yet myself, but I just want to explain what documents the previous speaker, so MP Waver, is referring to and how they are handled once they are received with a request for confidential handling. In the submission of this information to Parliament, the minister referenced the meeting that was held before, and thus submitted these documents, and as I mentioned before, with the request that they be handled confidentially. So not all members, I don't know even if all members are aware of it, one, and I am sure not all members had the opportunity to ask to peruse them because it was only today that these documents or this documentation was received. So just for the general explanation, that is what was just referenced to or referred to. So we continue with the members of Parliament, and I see. No, we can't do that. Although you could use the interruption lectern and you will be making an assertion. So you will, or give. Yeah, but via the interruption, you can either ask something briefly, make an assertion, provide additional information. You want to use none of those avenues. Okay, so then we continue with the speakers list, and I give the floor to MP Lacroes. MP Lacroes, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon or evening, Madam Chair Lady, Griffier, Prime Minister, his support staff, those in the Tribune, my fellow colleagues, and all those watching and listening through social media. Madam Chair Lady, I'd like to first start with two corrections. One is the documents did not reach Parliament today. They were here on Friday. That is one. I'd like to make it extremely clear that the reason I was not at the first meeting today was because I was awaiting to peruse these documents and eventually could have only done that after that meeting was canceled. And I thought at that time, and I still do believe that this meeting is a lot more important than that meeting, not that it's not important. Madam Chair Lady, to answer the previous speaker concerning the documents only speaks of doubts to the integrity of our SG, because these are the documents that we received today. There's nothing different in the documents, absolutely nothing different. We sat and we saw those documents, and I am extremely, and I must say it, Madam Chair Lady, through you to the Prime Minister, I am disappointed that the Prime Minister didn't come and give us his stapled bundle of documentation for us to be able to peruse and make a fair decision on whatever it is we are doing today. The same way, after the Minister of Versa was warned, we got that staple to be able to look at and make our decision and conclusion that everything that was mentioned or that he mentioned, we see it back in the paperwork. Okay?
MP Lacroes, I ask your indulgence as I allow MP Roseberg to make an interruption. MP Roseberg.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Seeing what the MP that is currently speaking is bringing forward, I would like to make use of the opportunity to ask through you, Madam Chair, if the Prime Minister is willing, if he has a package of information to provide that through the confidential route so that we can receive that. So that's my interruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, so you have.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. And before allowing, you have made a request, and at the appropriate time, the Prime Minister can respond to that, to your proposal or your interruption with a proposal. And I will, before I allow MP Lacroes to continue, yes, indeed, for the good order of things in this meeting, indeed, the package by the Minister of VSA, Minister Brugge, is dated here in Parliament's registry as per the, or on the 22nd of May. Be it noted that I took note of the fact that this package is here, and, but I have not perused the document. I think it's important that I repeat that, although I stated it before, but I wanted to confirm the date of registration here at Parliament and just emphasize what I stated about how these documents are treated. MP Lacroes, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chairlady. Madam Chairlady, I must thank the member of the URSM for pushing that narrative even a little more. And also, like the way I've said it, it only brings clarity. And it needs to bring clarity. Madam Chairlady, and my fellow colleague, MP Ottley, mentioned it. Why now? Why did it take so long? If something was wrong then, and we're talking about a year plus, why did we wait until now to bring it forth? Like my fellow colleague, MP Lyndon Lewis mentioned, were there any reports made, TBO, Integrity Chamber, was anything done before today or the last month? Madam Chairlady, and I hope the Prime Minister understands that what that does is brings doubt. That brings doubt to the mind of the common folk. The most simple child would ask, but why only now, Daddy? If this was already known since then. And Madam Chairlady, I will, because I see the Prime Minister, and I hope that he's not going to tell me only now he find out about these things, because we had this discussion a year ago. Then I told the Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chairlady, fix it. Get this in order, because it is an embarrassment to the country. It is an embarrassment to my Prime Minister, because that position, no matter who it is sitting in that position, represents the country, St. Martin, and every member of Parliament here with us. It is an embarrassment. Madam Chairlady, Minister Bonkamper, Minister Kimberly Liwachang, Minister Javier Silvania. What do these persons have in common? An allegation, step down. We're not going to drag the country through this mess. We are not going to drag the country through this mess. And it's whoop, 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 it's over and to be dealt with the proper authorities. Today we are now a month, 2 months, a year further dealing with a situation while the people's work is not being done. I expected better. Madam Chairlady, imagine I put my heart and soul into running an election the way I know best to do it. I am elected. And then the party, my party leader, puts people in my cabinet and tells them, or the board tells them, your job is to find dirt on him. I ask myself the question, who in their right minds will want to run on a party like that ever again? That's what I ask myself. How could I feel comfortable working, knowing this? I said to the Minister of VSR then, I said, you crazy. I would have been gone long time because they could put anything on you. And before you know it, you're up point blanche. And they got quorum. I expect better. Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister spoke of payments. And then just for the regular folks to understand, because I want to understand, where are the checks and balances? Because if I draft an advice to PayPal from out of the cabinet, what is the route that advice takes before the last person clicks that button to make that payment? Please explain that. Because that means we have a problem in the whole ministry, including finance. Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister said, and I hope I didn't understand what he said. The Prime Minister said that she was appointed politically. Before me, I have a post that was made, and I'm trying to find where did this go wrong. Dat starts, sinds halverwege juli ben ik in start gegaan als wetgevende jurist voor de prime minister via het ministerie van AZ. Geen politieke benoeming, waar ik daarnaast optreed als jurist-adviseur wanneer dat nodig is. And it says, since halfway July, I have started
MP Lacroes, allow me to give MP Jansen-Webster the floor for an interruption. MP Jansen-Webster, you have the floor.
Good evening and thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that the MP currently speaking indicated that the Prime Minister said that she was appointed politically. And I do not recall hearing the Prime Minister saying, I heard the Prime Minister mention that the Chief of Staff in his cabinet, Mr. Plantain, was appointed politically. I heard the Prime Minister indicate that the legislative lawyer came in via Payano to Yezetinwe and was seconded to the cabinet. So I wanted to correct that statement if I can. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Veronica Jansen-Webster. MP Lacroes, you may continue.
Madam Chair Lady, I'll read it again so people could understand. And this is a post by R.T. Baran. And again, it's public. It is what it is. And it says, since mid-July, I have started as a lawyer or advisor to the Prime Minister, and it's not political. I was hired by AZ. And it continues. So I'd like the Prime Minister to explain exactly what that is, because I'll have to go back into the meeting to hear exactly what the Prime Minister said. Madam Chair Lady, what is the difference to the Prime Minister? What is the difference between the appointment of the SG and the appointment of the Chief of Staff? That is the question. What is the difference? The Prime Minister mentioned that the SG won his case. Did he win the appeal? And why not? And if he did, how did he win the appeal? Prime Minister, do you understand that it is almost impossible for me to agree with that statement? If an individual was fired, a court case was held, there's an appeal, and then the Prime Minister's office or government, who should now submit their appeal, does not submit an appeal, and the individual then wins automatically, and then hired by the Prime Minister to work in his cabinet. That doesn't look good. Then it looks as if the Prime Minister on purposely did not submit the appeal and then hired the individual. Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister mentioned that he drafted a memo and didn't sign it and send it to Secretariat. Madam Chair Lady, how is that possible? If the memo that we saw today had the signature of the Prime Minister. That document is in the documents that we are allowed to see today. Or are we talking about another memo? Because once that memo is signed and sent to Secretariat, then please help me understand if that document is not going to be shared with the whole Council of Ministers. Did that document go to the Netherlands? Madam Chair Lady, when the legal or the legal advisor was hired, was she or was she not employed by a High Council of State? Madam Chair Lady, there's so much things wrong with all of this that it creates even more confusion. Madam Chair Lady, I hope in the package that the Prime Minister seemed to agree to show us, there's a contract. I'd like to see the date on that contract. I'd like to see the date on that contract. Because maybe what we've seen online is AI and fabricated. So I just want to make sure. I'd like to give my Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt. Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister is in charge of facilities. Being in charge of facilities, the question is Is that building a building, or is that after the building is built and the maintenance of that building? And I asked that question because I heard that extra funds for the building was requested and acquired by 2 previous ministers of VSR. So how can it be that it falls under the Prime Minister? I want to understand that. Madam Chair Lady, there are a lot of accusations running around. To the Prime Minister, and I want the truth. Prime Minister, did you or did you not request from a former Prime Minister to disregard the established bidding process and conditions outlined in BZK approved letter in favor of a preferred candidate for projects valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars? Madam Chair Lady, the question to the Prime Minister is, what was the opinion of legal affairs with that situation? Was the Prime Minister told that this is against the law? Did the legal, who was dismissed before, now working in the cabinet, what was his advice concerning this? What was the advice from his board, which is lawyers? What was the advice from Ministers Brug's cabinet when this took place? The question goes back to, did the Prime Minister receive or had a conversation with a previous Prime Minister who heads the TWO concerning the bidding process? Did the Prime Minister advise this person to disregard the bidding process and conditions outlined in BZK and the approved letter in favor to prefer another candidate for the projects? Madam Chair Lady, on page 12 of the letter that Minister Brug sent to the board, I'd like to ask the Prime Minister this. Do you believe it is appropriate to share confidential terms of reference documents with a civil servant employed at the Council of Advice? And if so, under which legal basis?
MP, you have less than a minute left, about 30 seconds.
Madam Chair Lady, I have more questions, so I'm going to leave them for the second round. And maybe in the package that we'll get from the Prime Minister, I'll be able to see some of these answers, but also to answer some of the questions that I still have pending. Prime Minister, I'd like clarity. And right now, I'm more confused than anything. And the only thing I'm saying right now is real simple. If there's no clarity, everybody got to go home. because it's a shame to the country. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacroes. Members of Parliament, this is the end of the round of questions. This would have been the end of the round of questions. Again, I invite the members to not have me having to say this, would be if you would sign the speakers list, and I would then call your name. So I say that to give MP York the opportunity to sign and take a seat, and then I give MP York the floor. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, Griffier, Prime Minister and support staff, honorable colleagues, and to those still watching. Madam Chair, the Prime Minister started off through you, the Prime Minister started off the meeting with a very sensible address stating that, in his opinion, the Minister of VSA was very irresponsible in the previous meeting, where he only came with allegations against him and didn't discuss his own issues. And also that in bringing up another example stating that normally it's up to the accuser to bring the proof that the person has against the accused, and not for the accused to defend it. Only, Madam Chair, to do the exact same thing after that. Exact same thing that the same MP that had to remind the other minister had to remind the Prime Minister what the agenda point was today. And Madam Chair, I say this to say the following. The same way what the Prime Minister said, saying it's up to the accuser to bring proof of what the accused did. Madam Chair, I see no proof for what the Prime Minister brought today. I hear allegations, not saying they're not true. From what I could deduce, the Prime Minister does have paperwork, but he did not bring them, Madam Chair. So the Prime Minister is doing the exact same thing he accused Minister Brugge of doing, laying allegations irresponsibly without proof. Madam Chair, going back on something the Prime Minister said, referencing the mental health facility and the building of the construction of the new mental health facility. Madam Chair, this is something that, again, made the hairs on my hand stand up, because the Prime Minister referenced saying that the Minister of VSA normally shouldn't have anything to do with the construction process of said project. But Madam Chair, it made me confused because last year, a little bit more than a year ago, the same Prime Minister and the same Minister of VSA were here in separate meetings where we were asking as MPs stating who is going to head this project, to which the Prime Minister said the Minister of VSA will be the contact person and that he sent the email to NRPB stating such. So I don't understand where the problem is now stating that the Minister of VSA had no rights to be in the construction of the mental health facility talks. I'll take it even further, Madam Chair. I'll take it even further because, you know, sometimes people accuse us of yapping at the moon, but I can substantiate everything I say. In the minutes from the meeting where the Minister of VSA was here, I have a timestamp, Madam Chair. At 1 hour, 4 minutes and 32 seconds, I interrupted the Minister of VSA to talk about, to question him on him referencing the master schedule of the project and him obtaining the master schedule of the project. We had a whole 3-minute back and forth about how is it that that falls under the auspices of VSA, and is it going to go to the Prime Minister and he's going to, via you, Madam Chair, forward it to the Minister of VSA, or is it going to go directly to the Minister of VSA? And that was whatever had to be cleared up in an email. And that was discussed then, Madam Chair. I'll take it even further, Madam Chair. An hour later in the meeting, I referenced and I asked the Minister of VSA about this technical assistance being referenced, of being requested, or to be requested in a tour, terms of reference. The Minister answered. Take it even further, Madam Chair. Again, I brought it back up a half an hour later. If he found it was right that the person rumored to be going to be appointed via the tour was the right thing to do. To which the Minister of VSA, not the Prime Minister, the Minister of VSA answered in front of everyone, Madam Chair. I even went as far as to reference and ask about the rumored 8,000 guilders that the Prime Minister today references as what the payment was per month or whatever for this consultation fee. Madam Chair, and one thing that was very reminiscent Crickets, Madam Chair. I asked these questions, the minister answered them truthfully, seemingly, because everything that's being accused right now, the minister spoke on here in floor in Parliament, and no one of the coalition said anything at that moment in time, Madam Chair. So there's all this talk about integrity. Is it integrity when it's convenient, or is it integrity at all times? Because right now, Madam Chair, at that moment a year ago, it was party, a coalition above country, and now that it's convenient, it's coalition, country above coalition. When it's convenient, Madam Chair, and that is what I have an issue with. I don't have an issue with saying Minister Brugge is correct, Minister Brugge is wrong. I stated it then, and I stated it when he was in Parliament the other day, and I stated it again, I don't agree with what the minister did. And I'm on record stating as such. And no one in here on the other side backed me up, Madam Chair. No one. But yet we are here stating integrity problems and integrity issues, integrity this and integrity that. Madam Chair, it was also reference of, in the words of the Prime Minister, the husband taking part in construction meetings. I would like to know, was the husband, according to the words of the minister, sitting in what capacity? What capacity was he sitting in those meetings? As a representative of VSA or a representative of SZV? I would like to know in what capacity was this individual sitting in those meetings? And taking it even further, Madam Chair, through you, Madam Chair, the Prime Minister touched on the word hijacking of ministry. And with the explanation, Madam Chair, trust me, via you, I understand where the Prime Minister is coming, basically saying that big legislation was his baby. Something that he worked on or was working on prior to being in office, prior to being a Prime Minister. And at the end of the day, he is right, Madam Chair. He's a doctor. He knows what he's talking about with that. I totally agree. But then, Madam Chair, if the Prime Minister wants to walk this legislation through, then I'm of the opinion, Madam Chair, that the Prime Minister should have taken the position of the Minister of VSR, as everyone else in the country expected him to do. No, that wasn't me. So, Madam Chair, as I said, if the Prime Minister so much cares of these things, all things medical, the Prime Minister should have become the Minister of VSR. He should have took that mantle. He had the choice. He had the opportunity. Don't defer to someone else and then still want to meddle with it. Because, Madam Chair, at the end of the day, if a minister, let's say right now, Madam Chair, via you, if there was a minister right now in the Council of Ministers with a background in human relations, human resources, is that minister then allowed to just take over things from P&O and say, I'm going to do it for you? Is that minister allowed to do that, Madam Chair? Because that's basically what's happening now. Madam Chair, speaking about this thing, hijacking of ministry, etc., maybe the minister used the wrong word, maybe. But Madam Chair, it cannot be that all this attention is being laid on a ministry such as VSA, when I see here an article from March 17th, vacancies, Ministry of AZ, Section Head Security, Head of Foreign Relations, Head of Legal Affairs and Legislation, Head of DMO, Section Head P&O, personnel officers within the personnel department. Madam Chair, these are all things that are missing right now in the Department of the Department of General Affairs. Madam Chair, we have legal affairs issues, fire and ambulance issues, civil servant indexation issues, jubilee issues, GB issues. Madam Chair, speaking about GB, I have here another article stating in, when was this? August 21st, 2025, where the Prime Minister came out saying household subsidy for all, Madam Chair. Household subsidy for all. I stood up then and asked, how you plan on doing that? Minister turned around and said, don't worry, December 1st. I got it here highlighted. December 1st. So all these things are pending, Madam Chair, but the Prime Minister sees it fit to help another ministry in their endeavors, when his ministry, basically, Madam Chair, via you, is in the fick, like how they would say in Dutch. In shambles, thank you. But yet, we are here discussing issues between two ministers internally. Madam Chair, I'll take it even further. We are here, basically there's a meeting called, Madam Chair, for this week. I requested, and it's going to be called this week. For integrity matters, basically I understood from another MP of the coalition, the last meeting, there's a motion that's going to be brought against the Minister of VSR. A motion basically that members of parliament have to vote on. But Madam Chair, when this whole thing started, when the chief of staff was banned or denied access to the government building by the Prime Minister, then MP Irian stood up and asked questions about it, followed by other members of the party, of this party. Madam Chair, the same board found it fit to go to public, take it publicly, to tell us MPs, members of parliament, to mind your business. And that is internal matters. So they went publicly to tell us to mind our business. But yet they're coming to parliament now for parliament vote to get rid of their minister. Make it make sense, Madam Chair. Make it make sense. 1 minute we are told to mind our business, and then we're asked to vote on something when, before we ask for any proof, Madam Chair, of Minister Brugge, and before the MP Roseberg asked for any proof from the Minister, Prime Minister himself, we had no proof. We had no proof. As a matter of fact, Madam Chair, there's a meeting called by the coalition this week to send, allegedly to send the minister home, and there was never no official proof given by the Prime Minister, which means, as MP Waver spoke to, something was leaked. Because for some reason, votes are going to be made this week, and half of Parliament, a little bit more than half of Parliament, has the information, seemingly, because they're voting based on something. Because I have seen no documents, Madam Chair, from the Prime Minister. So what is this vote based on? Madam Chair, it cannot be, as I said, convenience, that right now, something that I find the minister did wrong, and is being brought in question right now, a year later, Madam Chair, and, you know, I got to give the Prime Minister a little kudos on one thing. Up to now, I've never asked the Prime Minister anything he refused to answer. And with all the allegations from the Minister of VSA, I would assume that the following questions, the Prime Minister would understand why those questions have to be posed and that they should be answered. Prime Minister via you, Madam Chair, in light of the accusations, the allegations, and the assertions made of the involvement of the URSM's board in politics, political decisions, I would like to ask the following. Has anyone from the board of URSM have contracts with the PM's cabinet? If so, who and what positions and assignments were given? Where the assignments are concerned, how much is being paid for these assignments to these individuals, companies, or associated with them? And what procedure was followed to grant them the assignments? Was there a tour published? Was there a vacancy published? Madam Chair, the people need to know. The people need to know. Because we hear discussing about nepotism and favoritism and all these things when it comes to integrity about the Ministry of VSA. Madam Chair, there's another minister of the Council of Ministers, when they first took office, her then Chief of Staff, husband was given a contract. Was that not a conflict of interest then? A former Chief of Staff, at the time Chief of Staff, significant other, was given a contract. Was there a tour done then? Was there a vacancy issued then? Madam Chair, these things has been happening with this government repeatedly. This government. Let me make it clear, the Minister cabinet too. And I don't know if it's happening in one year, I ain't sure. But we're talking about two. So, Madam Chair, it happens with other ministers. It's been happening with other ministers. As a matter of fact, in the prior meeting, another MP stated, skipping a certain way is a no-no. Madam Chair, how many times, especially this faction of NA, has been going back and forth with ministers over the last 2 years about skipping a certain way? And every time it's being said, it's not a problem. It's not mandatory. It's just an advice. But now we want to use that advice as the Holy Grail to say, no, the way what he did there was wrong. And again, Madam Chair, what I'm saying here does not absolve the Minister of VSA from what he did. But rule for one, rule for all. And if you're going to send one home, tout le monde got to go home, Madam Chair. Everybody. Because everybody doing it. Everybody. And okay, let's not say everybody. More than just one doing it. Before my words are taken and used against me. More than one person is doing it, Madam Chair. More than one minister is doing it. So again, Madam Chair, in closing, I said it the last meeting, and I'll say it again. We're here discussing internal issues between ministers and of the coalition, Madam Chair, and there are meetings such as what my colleague MP brought up, speaking about country expenditures and revenue generation measures. We have meetings requested based on traffic and issues with the infrastructure. We have meetings referencing a lot of other things, Madam Chair. Things that the people of St. Martin want to hear us speak on and want to see movement on, but yet we're sitting on here still. Right now we spent 4 hours discussing internal issues, and now the Council of Ministers are coming to Parliament for Parliament to solve a Council of Ministers problem. And lastly, Madam Chair,
MP York, I was going to allow you to finish your sentence, but since you paused, I'll allow MP Lewis to make his interruption. MP Lewis.
Madam Chair, while we sit here, even though I didn't want to interrupt, this country really have a problem. Simpson Bay is blocked, Madam Chair.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you, MP Lewis. And since I mentioned that I know, yes, it has to do with the fact that a grape tree, albeit that it was mentioned before that was happening and either has been cut down or is being cut down. And so that is happening in Simpson Bay at this time. Thank you, MP Lewis, and MP York, you were finishing your sentence.
so thank you, Madam Chair. Even you know the country's in shambles, Madam Chair. Again, and in closing, Madam Chair, it cannot be that the last time when the minister was in here, the Minister of ASR, we had civil servants that didn't want to see government before the current minister took office in here to support the minister. It cannot be that almost every senior citizen on the road has nothing bad to say about this current minister. But at the same time, the government is saying the minister got to go home. So is it about egos, about I cannot work with you, or that you can do a good job for the country? What is it? Because seemingly egos going above country right now. And again, rule for one, Madam Chair, rule for all. It cannot be that today it is integrity breach, integrity issues, but for every other minister, just because it's convenient, it's okay, but I'll keep it in my back pocket until you step out of line. Because seemingly that's the modus operandi right now. You step out of line, I will use my back pocket while having my back pocket against you. Because if these things were brought up last year in that MHF meeting, Madam Chair, I would have nothing to tell the coalition right now. Absolutely nothing. But to see that 80%, 75% of what is being discussed today, there was already a designated meeting called for that last year, and no one said anything, don't waste my time now. Thank you, Madam Chair. That'll be it.
Thank you, MP York. I'll let your previous statement regarding myself slide, because I see everyone looked at me expecting me to answer, so I'll not answer and I'll just let it slide. And we continue. And I will now again start to close this session. Members of Parliament, when I bring down, well, I'm not going to bring down the gavel for closing the session, but when I say that we are finished, we're actually finished, and I'm going over to the other part of the meeting, which would be that we are going to be having, we have reached to the end of the questions by members of Parliament, and I will now, something just came to MP Duran's mind. I'll allow him to express that something before I close this session with the questions and go over and discuss with the PM when the answers to the questions as posed, when these will be given. I'll now allow MP Duran to mention what just came to his mind in this meeting. MP Duran, you mentioned you have something just came to mind for which you signed, and you thus have the floor. MP Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening to you, my colleagues, the Prime Minister, and the people of St. Martin that are tuned in, that are following this live. Madam Chair, I started this meeting in my notifications, and I mentioned that no matter how you twist it, shape it, turn it, this meeting is about a personal issue that started as a personal issue that became a national crisis between the Prime Minister and his Minister of VSR. It's still turned into melee down the line because that's the direction that the Prime Minister went with intricate details of situations that happen. And it's unfortunate. It's been unfortunate, and it will continue to be unfortunate. Madam Chair, through you to the Prime Minister, if the Minister of VSR isn't telling the truth, what do you plan to do in terms of, is it defamation? Would you take him to court? As my colleague mentioned, would you then file an official complaint for any potential wrongdoing? Because I hear Article 54 of the LMR being used, and I'm saying all that to say, Madam Chair, when the example was given of the former SG that was working as a legal advisor, he was a politically appointee and not a civil servant. But then when the example is given of the chief of staff of the Minister of VSR, she's then being termed as a civil servant and the LMR is then being applied. Saying all that to say, Madam Chair, I would like to know the truth of this because it can be on one end, we're using the LMR, and on the other end, it's not applicable. Madam Chair, I heard the Prime Minister mention, through you to the Prime Minister, there were emails of direct correspondence, of conflicts of interest, but yet we have nothing to show. So nothing is substantiated, Madam Chair. I'm not saying that it don't exist, but it would be nice to see it, and I heard my colleague, MP Roseberg, ask for these documents. Can they be provided in whatever way possible? If it's confidential, then provided through the confidential route. But hearing stories and not seeing the actual evidence put us in the same position as we were last week or 2 weeks ago when we were getting what the Prime Minister today is saying is allegations and melee and not true. But then I got to assume that everything that's being stated here today is not true either because there's nothing to substantiate. It's just facts. Through you, Madam Chair, Prime Minister, do you agree that your role as Prime Minister requires you to be extra careful when involving yourself in affairs of another ministry, especially when that ministry falls under another minister? Through you, can you explain, Parliament, what you consider to be a proper boundary between coordination as Prime Minister and interference in another minister's portfolio? Because I'm saying all that, Madam Chair, to say that we've seen where the Minister of Romy, in the past, publicly, directly, indirectly, have complained about the Prime Minister involving in GB. We've seen where the Minister of Education complained about the Prime Minister being too involved in the schools. And we've seen where the former Minister of Justice, now Member of Parliament, also makes certain accusations. So, Prime Minister, I could understand sometimes when you're responsible for a ship, when things go bad, you carry the weight. So do you feel that in one way or another, maybe you cross over into another minister's portfolio and did not feel comfortable? Because that is exactly what Minister Brooks said. He's just the first one to mention it openly, public, and give a lot of details to certain things. But he's not the only one that is saying it. And a lot of them shoo-shooing right now, saying he right, but they ain't coming out publicly. So sometimes you need to watch the circle. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Prime Minister. Did you at any time give an instruction, direct or indirect, to a civil servant within the Ministry of VSR on matters that would legally fall under the authority of the Minister of VSR? If yes, on what legal basis did you do that? If no, can you explain why multiple allegations have now surfaced claiming that civil servants felt pressured or uncomfortable with your involvement? Did you ever instruct civil servants to bypass their minister, department head, secretary general, or formal chain of command? Through you, Madam Chair. And I'll go now over to the medical licensing and possible liability. Prime Minister, Minister Brugge alleged that there were directives concerning permission for individuals to practice as a GP or medical specialist despite those individuals allegedly not meeting the legally established qualifications and requirements. Is this allegation true or false? Now, I could kind of answer this question myself because when I presented my interruption, the Prime Minister mentioned because he knew the individual, they were allowed and he took full responsibility. Now, my question is this through you, Madam Chair, to the Prime Minister. If something were to go wrong, I'm going to add, God forbid, something goes wrong with a patient in this person's care that don't have the proper legal requirements, who then carries that liability? Is it the acting minister that signed it, which is in this case the Prime Minister? Is it the minister that is in the position? Is it the medical institution? Who carries that responsibility? Because a lot of things happen in St. Martin, Madam Chair, and because some families or so are not fortunate enough to do autopsy, you never know, the story end right there. But there's a lot of talk of malpractice, in other words, and people don't like to speak it loud. But if something goes wrong with somebody that we know in advance is not certified, who then carries that responsibility? That is my question. Madam Chair, I would like to know through you, did the Prime Minister support, sign, promote, recommend, or pressure for the approval of any medical professional to practice in St. Martin after negative advice being issued by the Department of Public Health, the Council of Public Health, the Inspectorate, or any other competent body? If a doctor or specialist is allowed to practice based on the decision that went against negative professional advice and something goes wrong, which I just mentioned, who carries that weight? I really want to know who carries that weight. Would that liability fall on the government of St. Martin? Madam Chair, through you, to the Prime Minister, did you ever sign or attempt to sign an advice decree authorizing involving medical professionals while not formally acting as Minister of VSR, acting Minister of VSR? Were these cases where you were acting of VSR but still communicated instructions or preferences to civil servants regarding the medical licensing? Were any of these medical professionals known to you personally? Well, that was my question before I heard the answer, so I'm just going to skip that one because you mentioned through you, Madam Chair, that you know the individual, and that's the reason why you took that risk. Madam Chair, I would like to know from the Prime Minister, did you or will you benefit personally or professionally from the whole BIC registration? Because that is something that has also came up in the whole discussion with the 12-page letter. Madam Chair, one of the questions that keep ringing out, and some people ask it, my colleague MP O.E.C touching it as well, if all this wrongdoing was going on from February 2025, March 2025, I think June and May, in different months I heard the Prime Minister mention of wrongdoing by the minister, alleged wrongdoing, why did it take a year and a half to reach here? Why did it take a year and a half? And again, it seems as if now a tit for tat, you tell on me, I'm going to tell on you, and because it's exposed now, we're going to go down that road. But why is the country being subjected to all of this? Do you think it's fair, through you, Madam Chair? Do you think it's right that we're here discussing this right now when we have so much national crises taking place? Madam Chair, we had to govern in COVID. This government have a smooth ride, 200,000 extra visitors last year alone, money coming in, but still the people can't feel no sort of relief in no shape, form, or fashion. Make it make sense. They are creating crises, people are suffering, and then saying, no, and then the former government. I think that song run out now, though. I ain't hear it in a couple of weeks. So I think that's a sign of good light. Well, I hear the minister Tiat now, they're saying did it last week. Madam Chair, through you, I go now to the BIC situation. Minister Bruch alleged that someone, I'm not going to call the name, because that's not really my style. I call names of public servants and people that could answer me back, was engaged by you to draft the BIC legislation without the formal tender process taking place. Is that so? Was this person formally contracted? If yes, by whom, under which budget line, and for what amount? And what procurement procedure was used? Did Legal Affairs, VSA, Tewe, or the Council of Ministers approve the role before she began to work? Was there a formal advice supporting the engagement? Did you communicate with the SG of VSR or any VSR official regarding the changes in the terms of reference to the BIC project? And I would like to know through you, Madam Chair, did this person receive any sort of information beforehand, before the tender process, and was given an unfair advantage over anyone else that would apply? Did the selection committee ever raise a concern that the person had knowledge or internal information that should not have been available to him or her? In the letter of Minister Brook, it states that the person was asked how she obtained the knowledge of the confidential document. She alleged you should go ask the Prime Minister. Is that true? Through you, Madam Chair, to the Prime Minister, is it really true? Did you ever investigate this claim, Prime Minister? Or did you report it to the Integrity Chamber or any competent body? Did you, through you, Madam Chair, place the big project on hold or delay the placement of it on the Council of Ministers' agenda? And if so, why? Madam Chair, through you, to the Prime Minister, have you ever refused or delayed to withhold any advice from the Minister of VSR to the Council of Ministers' agenda because you disagreed with the content and tried to convince the minister to change said content? Did you ever tell Minister Brook or any VSR official, if you don't do this, it will not come on the Council of Ministers' agenda? Madam Chair, the reason why I'm asking these questions is because these are sentiments that have been expressed over the last couple of weeks, and I'm glad now for the opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth, as they would say. Madam Chair, I would like to know through you to the Prime Minister, Minister Brook alleged that confidential internal documentation were used by the board and could only have been obtained through leaks, including alleged leaks by the Prime Minister and the party leader. Did you provide internal government documentation to the board? And if so, why? Did anyone in your cabinet provide government documentation to the board? I would like to know, Madam Chair, or is it a possibility, did the USM board formally request any documentation through the formal legal channels, let's say, for instance, the LOB-verzoek, Landsverordening Openbaarheid van Bestuur? Did you advise the USM board to seek documents through official channels instead of relying on internal leaks? And Madam Chair, I would like to know from the Prime Minister through you, do you agree that leaking government documents for party purpose would in itself be an integrity concern? The reason why I ask this, Madam Chair, because Prime Minister, I believe that the same integrity standard should apply that you are trying to apply to the Minister of VSR should be applied to you as Prime Minister. Do you agree with that sentiment? And if allegations against Minister Brook is justified, a request for resignation, what standard applies when a similar or serious allegations are made against you? Have you ever requested an independent investigation of the conduct of the minister? Will you commit, through you, Madam Chair, to submitting all relevant documentations to an independent investigative body, as well as Parliament as a copy? Madam Chair, I'm a bit, again, I'm going to say this, I might seem a little off of my normal train because I feel frustrated that we have to be here discussing something that is, in my humble opinion, a minor issue when we have serious things taking place in this country right now, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, right now, there's an issue between the Prime Minister and the Minister of VSR. I would like to know next week, when there's an issue with Grisha, or the week after that, with Marinka, or Patrice, or Melissa, or Natalie, will they be facing the same situation here? Madam Chair, we are all individuals. We might not all agree. On this front row, I have two of my colleagues on the same party. We don't always agree, but there are ways to deal with things, Madam Chair. I always say this. I never use my personal feelings to deal with public matters. And that is something that I feel is missing in this entire situation. I believe it got too far out of hand, and right now there's almost no turning back. But I would like to implore this on my colleagues, each and every one. Whatever stick is being used to measure judgment on any one of the ministers should be applied across the board and consistent, because that says a lot about you as an individual. So what's good for one is good for the other. So for me, like I said before, last couple of weeks we heard a lot of allegations. Today received some substantiation. We have yet to receive the substantiation of the allegations made by the Honorable Prime Minister here today, and I look forward to that. Because right now, all I'm hearing is a lot of talk, no substantiation. And yet we are being expected to make decisions. Prime Minister, this matter cannot be reduced to whether the Minister Brugge and the URSM board can get along. This is not the country's concern. The country's concern is whether the Prime Minister used his office properly. The country's concern is whether civil servants were pressured. The country's concern is whether the procurement was processed and respected. The country's concern is whether medical licenses and decisions was handled in accordance with the law and not based on who I know. The country's concern is whether the Council of Ministers' agenda was used as a tool or coordination to use pressure a minister to change something. That is the country's concern, Madam Chair. The country's concern is whether there is a standard for some people and a standard for others, depending on who you are and where you are at that point in time, Madam Chair. Prime Minister, you owe the Parliament clear answers, not political answers, not party answers, but government answers. Because if the Prime Minister cannot draw the line between leadership, interference, between coordination and pressure, between public interests and personal interests, then the system is vulnerable, Madam Chair. Last but not least, I would like to know through you, Madam Chair, since you don't want Brugge in the Council of Ministers, will the party be giving him back his seat if they choose to fire him or he chooses to resign? Because, Madam Chair, at the end of the day, the individual was elected, duly elected by the people of St. Martin, and I also sat in a position where a lot of allegations was made towards my person, but yet, up to now, 7 years later, 8 years later, being in public office, I was never questioned. Nobody never knocked on my door. People have the right to say what they have to say, but without substantiation, Madam Chair, we have nothing. And it just seems personal to me until I see otherwise. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the clarity.
Thank you, MP Doran, for your questions. Members of Parliament, we continue, and we have MP Jansen-Webster. MP Jansen-Webster, you have the floor.
Good evening again, Madam Chair. Good evening to my colleagues, to the listeners. Good evening and welcome to the Prime Minister and his support staff. Madam Chair, I primarily requested to speak so that I can save my speaking turn for the next time. However, in the meantime, and although I have complete confidence in the Prime Minister that he will be able to answer to all of these allegations, I just had some minor questions such as hearing all the talks about an open feud and a back and forth between the Prime Minister and the Minister of VSA. I wanted to ask the Prime Minister how many public letters he himself released or press releases he released regarding this matter. Also, how many correspondence did the board release, and were these letters, were these press releases, how many were actually released on this matter? And since it seems as if the matter was being handled internally, I want to know from the Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, did the Prime Minister and the leader of the URSM actively try to resolve the issues with the Minister of VSA, and when did he start with that? When was the first meeting held with the Minister of VSA on these matters? And how did the board first get involved? So did the Prime Minister, was it the Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, who alerted the board? How was the board alerted to these matters? And then I hear from the other MPs, the question comes up, and I also wanted the Prime Minister to clarify the Article 3 mentioned with the approving of the doctor, the highest arts, and so if the Prime Minister can clarify that article and how it is relevant in this case that he mentions here, and also, are there other cases like this on St. Martin? And if so, how many? Because I know that there are 13, or I think it's now 14 Harris Artson. Do we have other cases like that, and since when? So if the Prime Minister can elaborate on that, and if there are other cases of doctors who do not have the Harris Artson brevet, then a certification, then what was the reason, or what is the article in the law that supports that? Is that the Article 3? What was used then for those other Harris Artson, so general practitioners? And then regarding, there was one, the bullying with the BIC. So with the legislative lawyer, there were questions from other MPs regarding the manner in which the Prime Minister, let's say, forced the VSR minister to use the services of the legislative lawyer. I would like to ask the Prime Minister to indicate to us what the exact wording of the document was regarding the involvement of the legislative lawyer. So what was the wording to the VSR minister in what the involvement would be of the legislative lawyer with the BIC that would be done via the Terrio facility? Those are my questions for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Janssen-Webster. I now go over and I give the floor to MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, all. Good evening, Prime Minister, support staff, and the viewing public. Prime Minister, I know there's another meeting for the Minister of VSR, and that meeting was called, I believe, the lack of confidence in the Minister of VSR, where the assumption is there's a vote, a motion, no confidence is coming. But I want to state that from the coalition perspective, you already down one, because a member of Parliament already made it clear in this House, and I believe the Member of Parliament, that he is not going to fight one of his own ministers. So you're only starting off with 8. So I'm hoping that you're very convincing when you come back with the answers that were posed to you today, because right now, you have not defended yourself based on allegations made by Minister Bruch. He came with black and white, we saw documents, and with you, we just have, Madam Chair, with the Prime Minister, we just have to believe, because he was a very good doctor and a surgeon, and he was trustworthy there. Madam Chair, working in a hospital is not the same as politics. I see a lot of people change. Prime Minister, my first question to you is, through you, Madam Chair, Prime Minister, did you inform the coalition when you heard, saw, identified these unethical integrity breaches? Did you inform the coalition? And when did you inform the coalition? I think these are important matters. I don't think these things should be secret, because I can't imagine that the coalition, that every meeting that we have here talks about good governance and integrity, et cetera, kept it hush-hush for a whole year and a half. A whole year and a half. Just kept it hush-hush to only use it when it mattered politically. The Madam Chair, the Prime Minister mentioned that based on the information provided, that the Chief of Staff created the advice and participated on the information and informed the other entities, the construction companies. Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the Prime Minister on what information. So the Prime Minister mentioned based on sound information. So who told the Prime Minister that the Chief of Staff, or who informed the Prime Minister that the Chief of Staff is who created this advice? Madam Chair, the Prime Minister also, and I think, and we have a long meeting, and I realized that this whole matter with Minister VSR is about one main issue, that the Prime Minister believes that the Chief of Staff operated without integrity, and the Minister of Visa. I haven't gotten the connection as yet with the Minister of Visa fully, but okay, let's see. The Prime Minister states that a contract was issued and a company was created, and right away they won the contract. Prime Minister, I would like to ask you, did you check or verify with the ministry itself? So from the SG, financial controller, department heads, whoever, NRPB, if they were all in agreement with how this went. It's not your opinion. The actual civil servants that have to deal in work, that helped organize and in the end award the contract, did they indicate to you to pay a no to anybody that falls under you? That, hey, we have concerns with how this went. Because when I was minister and a department head say, hey, I see a concern here, I don't like how this is going, we stopped it there and we dealt with it. So at what point in time did any civil servant come to you, Prime Minister, or the department heads, or PNO, and say, hey, we have a concern with this? Prime Minister, you mentioned, and I don't think, Madam Chair, that a contract was given for, I believe, let's say, under 50,000 guilders, and payments continued up until 80 plus thousand guilders. Prime Minister, we don't have to guess on these things. We don't have to assume. It can just be provided to us as members of Parliament. We could go through the confidential route and block out whatever name you have to block out and show us that this contract was given and payments continued to be made to the entity. And that's why we have this integrity issue right now. Because, Prime Minister, I know that payments just can't be made. So either the financial controller, the SG, the department head, the minister himself will have to write a document, a memo, or something to initiate payment. The Ministry of Finance is just not going to pay an individual, right, without some type of documentation to say, hey, make this payment happen. And I don't want to insinuate or create a scenario or create a story and make it seem as if. I want facts. So through you, Madam Chair, I would really like the Prime Minister to substantiate, bring some documentation, and bring clarity. Again, Prime Minister, I would like the truth. There was a contract you mentioned for 50,000 guilders or less, and payments were made. Were those payments made based on a contract? And as was mentioned by MP York, concerning if accountability. If it counts for one, it got to count for the other one too. So, Prime Minister, if the concern is that ministers giving up contracts to family members, which has happened with other ministers in your council currently, and payments continue to be made past the contract, then, Prime Minister, would you say then that they also have to go for integrity issues? Through you, Madam Chair, I'll even be clearer to the Minister. Prime Minister, are you aware? And if not, I would like you to ask the Council of Ministers when you get your answers. Are you aware of any minister that has given a contract, an agreement, an SLA, be very clear, to anybody to work in their cabinet and continue to receive payments past the 50,000 guilders? Again, are you aware of that? And do you agree then that they then should be accused or be labeled as integrity breaches, just like you're accusing the current Minister of VSR? Prime Minister, through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, the Bible talks about different sins, and a sin is a sin, some people say. So my question is, do you believe that an integrity breach matters on how heavy it is? That let's say, for example, do you believe, through you, Madam Chair, that if an item is being paid without a legal basis, that is also unethical, or you're breaking the integrity? So if a minister is making a payment and there's no line item in the budget. There's not even a budget. Do you agree that that's illegal? That lacks integrity? That's unethical? Because, I mean, we know for sure your government has done that. We know for sure that you, as the head of the Council of Ministers, have approved this also. So if you're approving $1 million illegally, right, I can understand why your fellow colleague, your USM member, maybe breached $40,000. Because his leader didn't lead by example. To today. So, again, Madam Chair, we have a situation in 2026, March 2026, and I want to talk about integrity, Madam Chair. The Prime Minister mentions that this integrity breach happened in 2025 January. So, if I was the Prime Minister, I would have said, you know what? I would bring the matter to the Council of Ministers at that time. So through you, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the Prime Minister, in January 2025, maybe it was late February 2025, did the Prime Minister bring the matter officially to the Council of Ministers? Did the Prime Minister formally address the Minister of VSR and allowed him to formally respond to him in January, February? And I'm talking about through the board, how many the Prime Minister of the country. Did the Prime Minister, when he saw or heard or identified any integrity breaches, did the Prime Minister go to the integrity chamber? Did the Prime Minister go to the Ombudsman, the audit chamber, the public prosecutor, if he felt it was that grave at that time? And obviously, the Prime Minister did not inform Parliament unless he informed the Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to know, did the Prime Minister maybe at least inform you as Chair of Parliament of these integrity breaches in January or February? Madam Chair, because it seems like the Prime Minister just held it in his back pocket and said, you know what? If you don't do as I say, I'm going to pull this out. That, Mr. VSR said it does seem a little like blackmail. Holding a situation over somebody's head for a year and a half, saying, hey, because I asked the Prime Minister, to you, Madam Chair, when he was here a few months ago, why are you handling BIC? He said, I was a doctor. Should I not be the one to do it? No, I don't agree with that. I agree with MP O.E.C. If you so wanted to finish the BIC, then you should be the Minister of VSR. Then you should be the Minister of VSR. Because it's not only the Minister of VSR complaining. Every single minister has been complaining that the Prime Minister is not sticking to his own part. And publicly. So I have to believe the Minister of VSR because, again, it's not only him complaining. Madam Chair, the Minister mentioned, again, integrity. And he mentioned the LMR. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, can the Prime Minister explain how a civil servant in his own cabinet, because the Chief of Staff is still a civil servant, was appointed to the Sabre Bank, which was a big announcement. I think even I said congratulations. Can the Prime Minister also provide a copy, based on the law, that the request and permission from the Minister of ECYS? So based on the law, you need a request, you need a permission from ECYS to be able to be appointed to a board. So can we get that also? Prime Minister, and I heard my fellow colleague mention just now also regarding the board and did the board do this and did the board send press releases? Prime Minister, I know one thing for sure. The people elected us to represent, not the board of USM. Not the board of USM. So the board of USM should not be interfering in government decisions in deciding who got to go. They could decide on an internal basis, resign from the party, or remove it from the party, but should not be telling us or informing us on any other decision, none at all. The Prime Minister is the head of state. The Prime Minister is the head of state. He should be informing us as Parliament. He should be sending press releases. He should be, what he said, the primus maximus. He should be operating that way. It seems like the board has all the power. It makes the decisions, even based off of the presentation given by Minister V.S.R. And again, and I agree with MP York, it was very bold of the board to say, members of Parliament, stay out of this. But now for 2 weeks, we got to be dealing with all the drama. This right now, all the comments on Facebook saying this is the worst novella they ever saw. The worst novella they ever saw. We're dealing with GB, that the Prime Minister promised subsidy. We're dealing with GB, that the Prime Minister mentioned that he's going to give funds to all the seniors. We're dealing with, right now, the Ministry of Brumby, we had a policy meeting this morning about nature, and right now they're cutting down trees in Simpson Bay. We're talking about the TOT on gas, but right now, for the last 2 weeks, we had to be dealing with the URSM novella. And back in the days, it used to be on Channel 17, the Spanish, or 18, the Spanish channel. Madam Chair, to ask the Prime Minister, was a mediator ever suggested or acted upon to resolve this matter with Minister Bruch? Dealing with the fire department, et cetera, et cetera. We had a mediator, or two, I believe. Was any mediation ever requested to deal with Bruch? Minister V.S.R. Madam Chair, I agree, and I will end here with MP Duran. In all fairness, we asked the minister to resign. He was elected. It has happened in the past also, where ministers came down and came into Parliament. Savannah also, yes, the highest vote gets in Curaçao. Is it going to be requested of the minister to resign and be able to get his seat back or not? Are we talking about fairness? And again, Prime Minister, to you, Madam Chair, are you going to hold all of your other ministers accountable and yourself at the same standard for the same illegal accusations? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. We continue, and the next speaker on the list is MP Kotai. MP Kotai, you have the floor.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. A good evening to all tuned in, the Prime Minister and my colleagues. Madam Chair, I'm just going to wait for all the answers from this first round and the documentation, and I'll save my comments for the second round. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Kotai. I see MP Myers is coming to the lectern, and I allow MP Myers to sign the speakers list. Take a seat, and I'll give him the floor. Something just came to his mind, which I'll allow him to express. MP Myers, you have the floor for what just came to your mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a good what is evening to my colleagues here in Parliament, to you, Madam Chair, to the Khifir, the Honorable Prime Minister and his support staff, those of you listening by radio, those of you viewing online, and to our one honorary member of Parliament, Mr. Ed Gums. Good evening. Prime Minister, I just have a couple questions. I have to concur with MP Duran on his statement where, to me, this seems a bit like indeed, you can agree, an internal battle between two members of the COM. And of course, it has, in the words of our St. Martin old people, it has festered to the point where it has become now something that is being deliberated on the floor of Parliament. But I I prefer to take a different approach. So I just have a couple questions, three questions. How do you define integrity in public office, and what specific behaviors best show it in your day-to-day role as Prime Minister? What concrete steps has your government taken to strengthen public sector transparency since you have taken office as Prime Minister? And last but not least, how does your government protect whistleblowers who report misconduct in public institutions? That's it. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Myers. I don't think there's anyone left in the hall who has not spoken, so I can confidently now, I was going to say, close this part of the meeting. MP Doran, I'm hearing you say you have a proposal of order. I invite you to state it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to propose that we halt the meeting with the continuation of the meeting of Minister Bruch based on the integrity issues until we get a response from the Prime Minister so that we can have a whole picture of the entire situation before having to make a decision in the coming days and be able to peruse all documents so that as members of Parliament we can make informed decisions.
Thank you, MP Doran. I cannot entertain your proposal, unfortunately, as a proposal of order has to do with a topic that way, and this is not the topic is not the meeting that is scheduled with Minister Bruch. So unfortunately, I cannot even entertain it. So the second and thirds of the proposal, notwithstanding, I cannot. So thank you, members of Parliament, and I look at the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, of course, we will have to caucus about the continuation of this meeting with the many questions that have been posed. I ask if you have any suggestions, first of all, for the continuation, and any remarks before I adjourn this meeting. Prime Minister Dr. Luc Mercelina, you have the floor.
Yes, President of Parliament, thank you for this opportunity. Seeing the amount of questions, I will need some time to make sure I get the answers for all the questions posed today, and I would like to leave it by you to see with the logistics when is the best time for me to come back to give answers to all the questions. Secondly, MP Roosburg asked if there is a possibility, even if via official confidential channels, if we could provide with supporting document, President of Parliament, if that is for you okay, I would like to send some messages to some documents to actually back up the statements that have been made today. So if that is okay, I will use the official confidential channel to canalize that. On the other side, I understood that the Minister of ESA sent some documents before the meeting. If the members of Parliament would like me to react on some of the statements, I would propose to the President of Parliament to see the possibility for me to get those documents. Otherwise, I would not be able to react on those documents. So I hope the President of Parliament will help me out to see if I can also get these documents for me to give a reaction on them. These are my three statements. Further, it's sometimes very complex to understand all dynamics in whatever field. In my case, I am also a healthcare professional, and I noticed the whole evening that we were talking about, is it legal for a doctor to work or is it illegal? This is a very, very complex topic about accommodating doctors to work in whatever field. There are in St. Martin now 19 general practitioners, in which some of them known for years, some of them very, very known and popular. There are 4 family physicians in St. Martin that has a specialized certificate to call themselves in the standard that we're discussing about, family physician. So there is nothing illegal going on, for everybody to understand. From the 19 family physicians, only 4 of them has the specialization. So if something is illegal, it has happened since 10-10-10 under the supervision of other ministers of VSA too. So you have to understand this topic before you just start making statements without understanding the context of giving authorization to execute a profession, because there's a lot behind this before just saying it's illegal or it's legal. So I repeat, there are 4 doctors working in St. Martin with the certificate that everybody is so spastic about, and the most known house doctors in St. Martin do not have that specialization, and it's not necessary to, by the way.
Prime Minister, with your indulgence, I think you were rounding it off, your statement,
Yeah.
but in any case, I will give MP Doran the opportunity for an interruption. MP Doran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, another quite, in my humble opinion, disturbing statement from the Prime Minister, because you're saying then only 4 are certified, but you're a health care professional, so you know this. So if all other ministers of VSA, which I was an acting minister of VSA for a time as well, was not aware of this, but now you're knowingly allowing something that is not correct to continue, that doesn't make it right. And I find that quite unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Doran. Prime Minister, were you finished with your statement?
Yes, I finished with my statement, but I would like, Madam President, if I could get the opportunity to just give...
Please do, yes.
Mr. Doran.
I invite you to.
The contrary is true. I am not against the doctors to work. I want them to work. So it's not that I'm looking over a situation that I should know better because they should have. No, I'm telling you, like the doctors that we have a misunderstanding over, that without this specific certificate, I promote for them to work. So your statement of just now was not correct, because I do believe that they can work. And that's why the other 15 ones are perfect GPs are working at this particular moment in St. Martin too. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Members of Parliament, Prime Minister and your support staff, the support staff of Parliament, all tuned in to this meeting up until now. I want to thank you, the members, for your participation, Prime Minister and his support staff for your participation in the meeting. I want to thank the public who was tuned in and remained tuned in. This meeting will be adjourned until further notice. We will communicate to the members of Parliament and the general public when this will continue, when this meeting will continue. That information will be provided soon, the information about the continuation of this meeting. Until that time, have a good evening, and this public meeting of Parliament is hereby adjourned. Meeting adjourned.